I'm sure that all of you on Reddit No Sleep are used to crying for help stories. Help me, blah, blah, blah. I won't bore you with another. Even if I wanted your help, you can't give it to me because your help is useless. Why? Because you're not a member. I just wish that I wasn't either. It started innocently enough, though, with a phone call. I'd been up for a few hours, unpacking and cleaning, waiting for the plumber to call. I just moved into a cabin, and the constructor fucked everything up. Because of that, I now had the wonderful task of making calls to impotent people that could fix what the original constructor did wrong. The phone rang at 12:06. Not bad, I thought. Usually plumbers don't bother to call or show up until 5. When I picked up the phone, I didn't even get the chance to say hello before a woman on the phone told me to please hold for the next available operator. I hopped up and sat on the cabinet in the kitchen. It was the only few places in the cabin that was not occupied with boxes. Elevator music leaked into my ear. I started to drowse off when the music stopped and a piano chord that sounded like it was 3 notes that didn't go together played through the receiver twice. Name on the phone line. Welcome to the Booth Road Industries. My name is Samantha, and I will be your operator today. Name? I didn't know what to say, so I told the operator my name. Sir, we know who you are. I'm your operator. Please give me a name to access. I don't understand. It can be anyone, sir. We just need a name. Okay. I made up a name. Harold Withers. Sir, as your operator, I must point out that fiction names, or the names that people you don't know, cannot be used. Used what? I asked. How had she known that I made up that name? The whole thing felt like it was some sort of prank, but hardly anyone knew my new phone number. Remodeling? Is that the plumber? I asked. Welcome to Booth World Industries. My name is Samantha, and I'll be your operator today. Name? I took that as a yes, and gave them the name of my old ex-girlfriend, Jessica Goodwin. I could hear the clicking of the keyboard that sounded on the other end of the phone. It sounded like the woman was pounding the things with her fist. After a few moments of this, she returned. Jessica Goodwin, she said. Remodeling is scheduled for August 21st, 2015. Would you like to reschedule? I was silent on the side of the phone. I couldn't believe this. Someone was playing a prank on me. Who is this? Is that you, Jessica? Are you playing a prank on me? The woman didn't respond for a long time. I thought that whoever was on the other end of the phone was hurting me to laugh. Hello? I asked. Yes, sir. The woman asked back. Yes, I asked, not understanding what the woman was asking. I have a Tuesday appointment available. Will that work? At this point, I thought I was going insane, and it practically was the plumbing company. What about today? I asked. Do you have anything available for today? No, we can arrange for rescheduling on short notice. Today, we had a cancellation. How does 3 o'clock work for you? 3 o'clock is fine, I said. 3 o'clock it is then. Would you like a courtesy call? Sure. Wonderful. We at Booth World Industries say thanks and welcome to the club. Have a marvelous day. That strange chord played twice again, and the line went dead. I rolled my eyes and went back to unpacking. My phone rang again at 3 o'clock on the dot that afternoon. Hello? I said. Sir, this is Samantha with Booth World Industries again. Your courtesy call begins now. What do you... I began to say, but the cord was cut off, immediately dismantled by cords blaring into my ears. Then I heard Jessica's voice. Why are you doing this? Jessica said. I could hear the tears in her voice. Jessica, I said. Sir, the operator said, she cannot hear you. This is a courtesy call. The appointment has already concluded. Please, Jessica begged. Don't do this. I'll do anything you want. Jessica's voice choked off with a wheeze, and all I could hear at the other end of the phone was rustling of clothes and more wheezing. Eventually, it stopped, and someone picked up the phone on the other end. The scheduled work has been completed. The morning's voice said. We at Booth World Industries say thank you and welcome to the club. Have a marvelous day. Sir? The operator came back on the line. Was that to your satisfaction? I sat there for a long time, cold sweat dripping down my ribcage. Jessica was my ex because I walked in on her and my best friend fucking at the party in high school. I smiled and whispered, that was perfect. Wonderful, the operator said. We at Booth World Industries aim to serve. Would you like to make another appointment? As I started stared at the water leaking down the door of the dishwasher. I smiled even bigger. Yes, I said. Yes, I would. Name? Dan. I don't have a last name. He's a contractor. Dan Aninsaba? July 13th, 2033. Would you like to reschedule? Yes, I said. How about Wednesday? Would that work for you? Didn't you say you had a Tuesday appointment available? I said. I did, but unfortunately that slot had been filled by another member. Would Wednesday work for you? No, I said. I have a job interview that day. What about Thursday? Unfortunately, Thursday will not work either. We are due to remodeling Wednesday night. What? I said. She repeats the exact same thing to me again. Can we reschedule my remodeling? Of course we can, sir, the woman says. It sounded like she was smiling on the other end of the phone. There's always a way. I waited for her to tell me. She didn't speak. How? I asked. Boothward Industries is always looking to add new members. We are, of course, a membership by invitation only club. Sadly, our membership numbers have fallen in recent years. Economic recenses, war, politics. What we would like you to do in order to avoid your own remodeling appointment is help us add several new members. The light at the end of the tunnel, I thought. How many members do you need? I asked. 1,000. 1,000? Yes, sir. Otherwise, we'll have to keep our reschedule appointment. We must inform you that the members that rescheduled that appointment did request a courtesy call. Everything stopped at that point for me. All my life, I'd skated by, not doing anything, not making a difference. My mouth actually dried up. I'd always thought that there was just a thing people wrote in books to be dramatic. It's not. I'll get you 1,000 members, I whispered. We at Boothward Industries say thank you and welcome to our club. Have a marvelous day. The connection ended. I hung up the phone and stared at it for a long time. I'm scheduled for remodeling on Wednesday, and someone will be getting a courtesy call to listen to my last few breaths. If I don't get 1,000 members to join Boothward Industries, it's funny. I'd always wanted to join an elite club. Bones and Skulls, New World Order. I'm not sure how I got in, but now I'm a member. I got until Wednesday to enjoy it. Like I said at the beginning, even if I wanted your help, you couldn't give it to me because you're not a member. Membership is by invitation only. I'm inviting you in. You can help me. Just call 630-269-7536. I don't know exactly why, but ever since I was a small kid, I could see people who they truly were. White is good and black is evil. I very rarely see whites, but I very rarely see blacks too. Most people are usually a shade of gray, like my stepdad and my little brother. My mother and my older sister have always been close to white, which makes sense for they are always devoting their time to helping out homeless people shelters. That all changed though when my big sister was found dead by the woods in our backyard. The police said that she had been asphyxiated and showed signs of rape. I will never forget my mother's cries when she found out. At the funeral, my sister lay there on her casket, the purest white I had ever seen. I looked over to my little brother. He was only 4 and did not fully understand what was happening. Standing next to him was my stepdad. He was pitch black. In my old bedroom, in the corner next to the bathroom door, sometimes I would see a shadow at night. If I blinked my eyes quick enough, I made it a game. But as time went on, I could see the dark shape without moving an eyelid, and I realized that every night it got a little bit closer. We moved out of that house a month later, and it was a good thing we did, because the night before we left, that thing was standing at the foot of my bed. I was born 4,000 years ago, in what is known as ancient Mustafa. On the 18th year of my life, I was struck down in battle while fighting a petty war on the behalf of King Uma. As I lied there, bleeding out on the battlefield, my enemy's sword is buried deep in my abdomen. I begged the gods to restore my life. For reasons beknownst to me, my wish was granted. I survived the mortal wound, but I soon found out the gods had given me a greater gift than I could ever have imagined. No longer was I confined to the limits of human mortality. No matter how badly I was struck, stabbed, or burned, I could not die. Diseases and time had no effect on my body as well. I've roamed the earth for 4 millennia, with the secret taking on multiple personas, some of which you may have heard of and studied about at universities even. I've been a king, 2 of them actually. I witnessed some of the history's greatest and most tragic moments in person. I even followed Jesus. I've always considered my immortality to be a gift, the most amazing treasure the gods could have ever bestowed on me. Until now. The maniac shackles me back onto the wall and begins to splash my face with gasoline. 4,000 years I have cherished life, but spending the last 3 years as the psychopath's captive has made me yearn for death. Ever since he's learned my secret, he hasn't stopped torturing me. He giggles to himself as he lights a match. By the time Kevin made his way down into the subway station, there was no one else there but a solitary old man, sitting on the bench, using his cane to help him sit up straight. Kevin squinted at the schedule on the wall. From behind he heard a grizzled voice say, "Whichever one you're waiting for. You're at the right station. They'll all stop here." Kevin turned to see the old man watching him. "Even the A6?" he asked. "They all stop here," he repeated the stranger, who appeared to be dressed far too warmly for the season. "I can't believe the A6 stops here this late on a Tuesday. The young man, the station is a major transfer point. I've been taking these trains for many years. Believe me when I tell you all trains stop here." As if in answer, the sound of an approaching train came from deep within the tunnel. It sounded like it was coming far too fast to stop. In fact, it sounded like it was running faster than subways usually do. It was only a moment before it was running past, but it wasn't the shocking part. All the cars were jet black and it didn't even look like they were painted, just made that way. Every car was covered in the most indescribable horrific graffiti. Wild splashes of red paint decorated the windows. It was paint, wasn't it? The lighting inside was very dim. All the passengers were shadow figures who stood unmoving. None of them were seated. Kevin couldn't make out any of his features. So why did he feel like they were watching him? The hell was that? Kevin demanded as the mysterious black train disappeared into the opposite tunnel. The old man hung his head, almost in shame. I'm sorry. I wasn't completely honest with you. This is actually one train that doesn't stop here. Only one. Where does it go? Pray you never find out. Kevin stood stunned in silence before the old man added, "By the way, if you're taking the A6, you need to go on platform 3. Kevin could barely grasp a word's thanks before walking away quickly. He stood before as he was leaving, he heard the man call after him. Also, he turned to see the old man fixing him with a surly gaze that let Kevin know that the stranger was about to give him the most important warning he'd ever hear in his life. The next time you see that train, it will stop. Don't get on. Our marriage had hit a rough patch, but I never thought it would be this bad. She would never say goodbye to me whenever I left for work, never looked at me in the eye when I talked to her. I'd reach out to touch her, but even then, her body felt stiff. She wouldn't acknowledge me. I honestly didn't know how we got here. We used to be so close, but something changed. My loving, warm wife had become cold and distant. It made me wonder if maybe it was finally time to bury her. You hear your child screaming, "Mommy, there's someone in the bedroom. Turn the lights on." Of course, you come to your child's bedroom, turn the lights on, and find no boogeyman, no monsters, no creatures. Children and adults alike have adapted to fear in the dark. Why? Well, it's something called fear of the unknown. We as people fear what we cannot see, what we cannot feel, and what we do not know. We do not know what might come at us, nor can we see what really lies in the dark. So why are kids more afraid of the dark than adults? The answer? Maturity. But adults shouldn't know that the dark is only blankets between fiction and the truth. And without the dark, you wouldn't be able to hide, nor will you be able to tell yourself that it's just your imagination, because seeing is believing. Now you hear your child screaming again about the same boogeyman in his room. You go to your same routine, telling your child who is under the covers that there is no such thing as monsters. Then you turn on the lights to find there is no monsters, no creature, nobody under the covers. Two friends, Mike and Jim, were hanging out at Jim's house one day. Mike got up to use the bathroom. While he was gone, Jim heard a loud crash of breaking glass from inside the bathroom. He asked Mike what had happened and heard his friend reply, "Nothing, I'm fine." When Mike came out of the bathroom, he told Jim he had to leave. As he was leaving, Jim noticed something strange. The lettering on Mike's shirt appeared to be written backwards. Thinking nothing of it, Jim walked to the bathroom to see what had caused the loud crash. When he stopped and opened the door, his blood froze. Lying on the floor was Mike's dead body, covered in blood and broken glass. In the bathroom mirror was a gaping hole, as if something had jumped out. This morning, I stepped out of the shower into the bathroom was fine. White walls, white tiles, sink, and counter with toothpaste crust all over. 3 out of the 4 light bulbs of the mirror were still good, 100 watts, clear bulbs, blinding bright light in the white room. Like always, I was late, so I skipped shaving. She liked it when I didn't shave anyway. I was thinking about doing mutton chops. She'd get a kick out of that. I passed the mirror and noticed I was grinning. I didn't even know I was grinning. In the bathroom tonight, before bed, and something was wrong with the light. All 3 are on again, but the glow was kind of brown and didn't really light up the rest of the room. I should get more bulbs from the kitchen. I should, but I'm busy. The day was shit, and she shut her apartment door on me. You'd think that would wipe that stupid grin from my face from this morning. But I came back in the bathroom, and in the mirror, my face was still doing it. If I touched my face, it didn't feel like I was grinning, but there it was in the mirror. In the brown light, it's hard to make out, but you could count how many teeth show when you smile. I leaned in close. 1, 2, 3, 4. I didn't know my mouth was so wide. 9, 10, 11. Tom sat on the hard wooden staircase, watching the front door, waiting. He really had to leave, but right now, as he was about to go on, an amazing joke came to him, and he couldn't keep it to himself. Since his daughters were due to come meandering through the door at any moment, he decided that postponing for a few minutes wouldn't cause any harm. His daughters usually rolled their eyes and let out an exasperating sigh, and when he delivered his comedy masterpieces, but they still smiled. He never was sure if their smiles were because of his unsurprised hilarity, or if they were laughing at his lame attempts of humor. Either way, nothing brightened his day more than seeing his girls with smiles adoring their beautiful faces. That is why he was delaying his departure. He had the dad joke of all dad jokes, and he hoped it would eventually bring smiles to their faces. The doorknob began to turn. Finally, Tom rose, hovering above the crippled, lifeless bodies as his girls entered the house. "Girls, watch for the top step," he chuckled. "It's a real killer." After delivering his witty gem, he stopped, resisting, and relaxed as he now was pulled into the light. Slenderman walked in the forest normally like he would always do on his daily routes, stalking children and such. He usually stopped at the particular park near an elementary school to watch and study the humans. On his way back, he felt himself being watched. He turned sharply and quick to see who had followed such a monster like him, but when he turned around, no one was there. The boy in an oversized beige-colored hoodie noticed a tall man watching his schoolmates one afternoon. He would see the man there every day for weeks to come. He wanted to ask the formally dressed man why he did such, but always got too nervous to go out to him and ask himself. So the young boy decided to follow him. Slenderman smelt the human. The young child's fear was way too noticeable for him not to. He proceeded to approach the tree the hooded Absolute was hiding behind, but stopped. Slenderman knows he's scared. His job is to make children scared. That's what he did. He turned and teleported away. Boy in the oversized hood waited for a few seconds to turn around to see if the tall man was there. He looked on the ground and found a tree branch. He picked it up and wielded it. He heard a gust of wind and spun around. The man was gone. The boy breathed heavily and started to walk back to the park. He waited for his mom to pick him up and take him home. I can't believe I was too shy to approach him, the boy thought to himself. He lay down under a shady tree next to his favorite swing set, and he stared up at the clouds and thought, Why does he watch everyone? It's so creepy. Someone needs to tell him to knock it off. He lay down under the tree in snow for about 15 minutes and would think to himself, Why does he dress up so nicely just to look at people? Hey, come on, get in. He heard his mother shout from the car. Coming, the hooded boy said, jumping up and grabbing his school bag. He hopped in the back seat and the boy's brother shouted from the front, Hey, that's my sweater, you punk. Yeah, and it smells nasty, just like you, the hooded boy shouted. Sweetie, will you please take off the hood? You look like a thug, their mom asked. Oh, come on, Mom, I'm in 6th grade. I can wear whatever I want. You mean my clothes, pipsqueak, the older boy in the front whispered. Fine, I know it's your hoodie, and I'm just borrowing it. Jeez, it gets cold around this time of year. When the family got home, the oldest son took the car and left to meet up with some friends. Why does he always leave? The boy asked his mom. Well, I'm sure over this weekend he'll spend some time with you, she said, smiling. Do you want some hot cocoa after I start the fire? She asked him, kicking some snow away from the front door. Yeah, sure. The hooded child's life was unfulfilling. He was unhappy with his home life, and after his father died, he too felt like there was no purpose on living. The hooded boy tried to commit suicide numbers of times, but he could never pull through with it. All he had left of his dad is a butterfly knife. The Slender Man had to confront his stalker. He went about his normal route and followed his scent. He was led to an old track home. The scent was strong, but it was even stronger in a different direction, so he followed the stronger scent. It was the boy in his late teens. He was at that park with some other male humans. Slenderman studied his actions and plotted his death. No humans are supposed to even know he exists. He was eager to possess his life. He watched him live and be for a few short hours. He then headed back to his home, as did the teen. Ah, you're home. Why don't you spend some time with your brother of yours? Their mom suggested. Oh, all right, the youngest son said. He went up to his room and grabbed a small clear tub with Legos and Bionicles. Ah, for real? We're actually gonna hang with me? The hooded boy said. Sure. I like Legos anyway. The older boy smiled playfully. Slenderman looked through the window at the two humans cheerfully playing building games. The scent was strong, and so was the urge to kill, but he refrained. The weekend went by normally. Slenderman stayed at a distance. Slenderman watched his prey move about his normal lifestyle and do his activities such as school. Monday morning, while the youngest boy was sleeping in the older son was talking to his mom. Slenderman thought that he was talking to her about him. He took this as a threat, but in reality, he was just asking to hang out with his friends, but she denied. His begging made the illusion that he was trying to convince her that the tall man existed. The older son stormed out into his room without another word. Whoa, where am I? The hooded boy thought as he sat up. He was in the woods across the park. He waited in after school. He looked around, then stood up and reached for something that caught his eye. It was a piece of paper. The boy said. He touched the wrinkled page nailed to the tree. It had a picture of a stick figure surrounded by trees and the word no written all over the page. What am I supposed to do with this? He said aloud. He put it in both his hands and studied it. Before he rippled it off the tree, he turned around to be surrounded by black tentacles covering every inch of him until he screamed awake. He fidgeted around his bed, thinking of ways to protect himself,
but he remembered his dad's butterfly knife. He had left it for him. He slept with it in his hands just to be safe. He knew it was wrong, but the next day he decided it was best to carry it around everywhere he went, so he did. The day went by and it was Tuesday evening, and the two brothers just got home from school. "Hey, want to hang out at the park?" the oldest brother asked the younger one. "I guess. I don't really want to," the hooded boy told him. "Oh, come on, how come?" he suggested. I don't know. It's really stupid, creepy park." The oldest brother was in one of those moods where he wouldn't take no for an answer. "But yeah, I'll go." The brother was ecstatic by this. "Awesome. I'll bring the frisbee. Just let's grab Mom's car keys. Here, and take the house key." He was throwing the key chains to him. The boy in the oversized hoodie put the key around his neck and inside his jacket and then left. Slenderman knew today was the day that he would kill the oldest boy and his mother possibly too. He was thinking she possibly knew him as well. The two boys got in a car and drove to the park beside Slenderman's woods. They got out of the car and started to pass the frisbee one after another. The hooded brother ran into the woods after the frisbee was thrown too far. He picked it up and stopped. He stared at the woods that surrounded him. "Come on, throw it!" the hooded boy could hear his brother yell at him. But he just couldn't stop staring into nothing. The oldest boy walked over to the younger. He rested his hand on his shoulder. "Hey, come on, what's up with you?" he asked. The younger boy just stared deep into the woods. "Oh, hey, cool!" the oldest brother exclaimed and ran over to what the hooded boy was staring at. It's a weird drawing. I wonder what it means," the oldest brother told him. The hooded boy looked up in what he was looking at and filled with fear. "Don't touch that!" the hooded boy yelled fiercely at the brother, remembering his dream. Just don't," he begged his brother. "Well, why?" he said, ripping it off the tree. Slenderman appeared from nowhere and attacked the absolute teen. "Wait!" the hooded boy screamed, running towards the suited man. "You can't do this!" The hooded boy tripped on a tree stump. He looked up in dismay. The tall man killed his brother by suffocation. Tears in his eyes, he stood up and ran towards the tall man. "Why would you do such a thing?" he screamed, running up to the tall man, making fists and beating him. He probably didn't do much damage, but at least he tried. "The dream I had, that was my fate," the hooded boy thought. "You did this," he screamed at the tall man. The tall man set his lifeless body gently to the snow. "How could you? I was the one who followed you. Why didn't you kill me?" he screamed at him. Slenderman stood straight up and towered over the hooded boy. He had tears in his eyes. Slenderman had never seen a human in such distress like the hooded boy. With a tentacle, he lifted the boy up and looked at his sad face. The hooded boy kicked and struggled to get away from here, fearing he too would be crushed. This kid was the one following me," Slenderman thought to himself. The scent of the boy's brother was on his jacket he was still wearing. "I followed the stronger scent, but it was really him." Slenderman caught his mistake. The hunting instinct to kill overpowered his thoughts. Slenderman saw the struggle in the boy, the fight, the energy, the power. "I wonder," Slenderman thought, "how useful a human can be to me." The boy kept missing punches and power to fight was strong. His adrenaline flowing, pumping through his veins. The boy was not scared of me. The boy was not scared of me like the other children were. He was more determined, he thought silently to himself. "What do I do with him? I killed his brother," Slenderman said. Slenderman set the boy down in the snow next to his brother's lifeless corpse. "He can't hurt me, even if he tried, but I wonder what he would do," Slenderman thought to himself. "I usually kill teenagers because if they told another human about me, they would believe them. I'd be in trouble, but I usually don't kill children that often, unless they're alone or unaware of my presence. But this kid knew me and is really good at taking in his surroundings. It wouldn't be fun killing him just to be cruel, and I usually kill to eat. This kid is different somehow. Why don't you fight back? You can kill so easy. Why don't you kill me too? You're I don't know what to say. How could you do that? He yelled over all of his kicking, scratching, and failed punching. I leaned down next to the small child. He had a hate look in his eye like no other. He witnessed his brother's murder. He's reaching a level of insanity where there's no turning back. He's driven to hurt me. I haven't spoken to a human before, and I haven't spoken in years. I wonder if my English language is still intact. What can I say to calm him down? Make him sane again? I stared at the boy. I think we're beyond this point. They will tell the humans what happened if he will go crazy and put this kid in the sane asylum. The humans will look for me. That won't be good. He stopped kicking and attempting to hurt me. He fell onto his knees. He looked at the snow, put his hands on his knees, and paused. Why did you do that? He asked. I stood tall above the hooded boy, but I knelt down beside him and placed my large white hand on top of his shoulder. Then it was my turn to pause, until I finally spoke. I'm sorry. The boy made no physical struggle to move my hand. He heard my deep, frightening voice. He slowly turned his up to look at me. You spoke, he chattered in the snow. The boy got up and stood. He stood shorter than me, and I was kneeling. Why don't you have a face? The boy asked. He wasn't afraid of me. In fact, he was curious about me, like he had interest. I was caught off guard by the question. Myself never questioned my own appearance. I don't know how to answer the hooded boy's question. I don't know, I said, looking sad at the snow, my head in downward position. Oh, well, then why are you wearing a suit? This boy was very interested in me. I just killed his brother, and he's asking me about my appearance. I don't know. Why do you not run like the other humans? I asked in return. He stepped back a few feet from me and looked me up and down. He had this confused look on his face, like he was trying to figure me out. Well, I haven't a clue. I guess you look cool to me, that's all. But I think I know why other people don't like you. I was intrigued by his answer and lifted my head up in interest. Well, you're just very formal, and you don't have a face, he asked, taking a short pause. People usually can tell if a person's nice or not by the way they look, and since you don't have a face, it's kind of hard to tell if you're good or bad. His answer seemed intelligent, precise. I'd have never thought a human would be afraid of someone who was formally dressed. He continued, and also, you're really tall. You know, compared to me. Those facts were true about me. I stood up tall out of the snow. So, there are no humans this height? I asked him. No, I think you're the only one, he said. I sadly looked down at the snow. So what's your name? The hooded boy asked me. I vaguely remembered the time I was mentioned in the newspaper article. Humans called me sort of things like Tall Man, Tree Man, Slender Man. Slender Man was the most recent. Humans sometimes call me Slender Man, I replied. I'm going to call you Slender for short, though, the boy said, looking at his brother's body. Slender, why did you kill my brother? He asked me. I was nervous to reply. I was supposed to kill this boy, but he's not really a threat or a target anymore. I feel an emotion inside me, like I feel so bad if I did it. I had to, I told the hooded boy. He was my ride home, and you killed him, the boy replied with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry. I wish I could fix it, I told him. Then a thought came into my mind. He doesn't need to go back. If he did, they would send him away. But if he stayed with me, no one would hurt him any more than I have. The humans, they don't believe in me. They don't think I exist. They will think you killed him, I told him, but he shouted back, What? I could never kill my brother. I know it doesn't really matter what he thinks. Anyone will know that he killed him. Think about it. They will think it's you. You know it's not you. But they don't, I told him. He can't go back now. It will ruin his life. I'm sorry I killed him. But you can't go home now without him. You will be exiled from humans, I told him. Oh, so what do? Go live in a box? He said with fear. The fear of what would happen in the near future. Well, no. You would stay with me, I told him honestly. He paused, looking at me. and thinking about why he couldn't go back. He knew he couldn't. He knew he couldn't, but he was in denial. "All right, I'll go, but don't kill me," the hooded boy asked me. I wanted to reassure him I wouldn't harm him in my care. "I will protect you. You will live with me and you can do assignments with me, maybe a few chores now and again, but you will be set," I told him. "I will make sure nothing will happen to him." "All right, but is there sleeping and free food?" he asked. "Of course. You will be my assistant, a proxy," I told him. He seemed confused. Sometimes I forget he's only 11. "What's a proxy?" he asked cautiously. I took a moment to figure out my words. "Well, proxy means something valuable, like you represent something. To me, you will represent an assistant and roommate," I told him. "It's getting late. When do you think we can leave?" "Are you ready to leave at all?" I asked him. The hooded boy turned towards the park, then looked at his brother's cold, mangled body. The boy looked up at their car and back, then looked down, then back to me. He looked cold, like he wanted to get out of the snow. "We have been standing in the snow for over 2 hours. He seems like he's trying to let go but can't." "I promise you this," I started. "You have never told me your name, and you don't have to, but if one day you would like to come back to the memories, we can. You don't need to forget everything." The hooded boy looked up at me. "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you my name." "I don't deserve one, though." I was puzzled by this, so I questioned him on it. "What do you mean?" He looked behind me into the forest, and his eyes twitched all around the woods. The sun was setting, and it was quiet back there, but he continued. "If I leave with you, everyone will probably think I'm dead. My name and my face don't matter." He had thought of something I hadn't, his face and name. "Well, we will have to cover your face. I've got some fabric back where I live, so you can make a mask. But for that whole name thing, you will need to figure it out." I was just about to stand up super tall when he said, "Why don't you name me? I'm always named by someone. All the names I pick are always stupid anyway. So name me," he begged innocently. I never named something before. What would I name him? He does have a beige hoodie on, so how about that? Hoodie. I decided to ask him out the name. "Why don't I just call you Hoodie?" He looked up at his jacket. "This is my brother's hoodie, but I guess that will be all right," the newly named boy asked. "Actually, it kind of fits me. I am wearing this sweater a lot," Hoodie said. "I just got a new name, Hoodie. I don't want to remember my old one. I want to forget my life and leave it all behind. I'll go with Slenderman, and I don't want to die. I think he'll be okay. I feel weird though, like he's my friend somehow. I guess he's confronting to some and scary to most. I think I'm ready to leave," I said, looking down at my brother. I started crying. Slenderman came over to me and placed a large hand on my shoulder. "I know everything will be all right," he promised. I stood taller when I started crying and started walking. "Now, where do you live?" I asked him. He stopped and stood above me. "I live a few miles away in that general direction," he told me, pointing to the woods. He always talks very formal. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's go," I said, trying to run. My legs were limited in a foot of snow. I'm still crying, but I don't think he saw. Slenderman grabbed my hand. I was trying to get my feet unstuck in the snow, and he lifted me up. He held me and his tentacles behind him so I could watch where we were walking. "No use running in thick snow," he told me. His tentacles were warm, and they also looked thick, black vines. They looked like black, thick vines. They were coming out of his back. "Do you live in a nice house?" I asked him. I'm very curious of what kind of place a tall monster like him would live in. "Yeah, we're almost there. Give it a daytime," he told me. "A day? It takes a day to get to your house?" I screamed. "But how are you able to get here and here to school every day on time?" I asked him. "Well, Hoodie, I possess the ability to teleport. I can teleport here and there in an instant." I was impressed by his gift. "Well, can't you poof us there?" I asked him. "No, it's not that easy, Hoodie. I can only poof myself," he told me. After a few hours, I began to get sleepy. Then I remembered something remarkable. I felt my dad's butterfly pocket knife in my pocket, my mom's house key around my neck, and I wore my brother's hoodie. I will never see my mom again. She will probably think I killed my brother. It's for the best. If she never sees me again, she won't believe me. She'll think I'm a killer. Well, if I want to go home, I'm sure in a few years I can. I had the key. I started to cry. These items were representing my family. I don't even have a picture to remember them by, just the memories. I began to cry. I can't go back. This is for the best. To go off with a stranger who killed my brother. I guess even if he did kill me, it's for the best. The items hoodie held were clearly important to him. He started crying. I know he will cherish them for a long time. I wonder when he will get comfortable with living in the living situation when he can get to the mansion. I'm surprised he hasn't been getting sick around me. After a while, when I approach humans, they get sick and cough or spit up blood. I think he's too young to get it. Most of my older victims get it. Children usually don't. We got to the house after a night of walking in the snow. I was cold and the Slender Man looked tired, but not so much. It wasn't much of a house. It was more like a mansion. It was very empty inside, very dark and secluded from public. There were no roads that led to it either. When we went inside the front door was a bit damaged, but we could still manage to get in and lock it. The wallpapers were peeling off the walls, and the wooden floors were creaked and damaged. Go ground level into the room. Go look around and make yourself at home, for this is now yours. Slender told me. I began to walk on the ground level into the rooms, a lot of which had doors that were just laying next to the door frame because they were broken off the hinges. I walked into the room. It was small there. One slightly medium-sized place perfectly in the middle of the wall was a dark red curtain covering it slightly. There was a mattress with dark sheets and thick quilt thrown in place awkwardly on the bed. The bed was placed on a bed frame and sat on the floor. This was my new room. Today I watched Slenderman bring a few new kills, his normal amount for the week. I sat on the couch reading the paper. I noticed the date of the paper. My birthday was a few days ago. I turned 16. I got up off the couch and followed him to the basement where he kept bodies neatly stored. Hey, haven't talked to you in a while. I laughed over my coughing. Yes, it has been long since we had a conversation, Hoodie, he replied, placing one body on top of another. I'd taken to the name Hoodie quite well. My own name reminds me too much about me. You know, Hoodie, you've had that cough for a while now. Maybe you should see one of those doctors. I guess he's right, but I haven't seen a doctor in years. I don't have any insurance to see one. I don't have a human guardian to take me either. You're funny, Slenderman. But did you know it was my birthday a few days ago? I asked him. He dropped the body and looked up from where I was sitting on the staircase. Really? I did not know. How old are you now? 16, I answered. Happy 16th birthday, Hoodie, he told me. Thanks. I think I'm going out for a walk a bit, I told him, smiling. All right, be careful. Screw walking. I want to go to town and know if one is nearby. Maybe I'll walk by. I thought as I hurried to my room. I got out some scissors and started cutting holes in the big black beanie one of Slenderman's victims had on. I cut a frown smile in it, and then I cut some shapes out of red curtain and sewed it onto them. It looked really cool, so I wore it for my walk. This is good. No one will know what I look like now. I pulled the beanie down over my face and put on my hood like usual. I walked about 5 miles through the forest and came across a small town. I saw a man about 20 went up into the doctor's office. When he got it, he had a small orange bottle filled with pills to the top. He stopped at the curb before crossing the street to his car. Took about 5 of them and ate them dry. He had a cough just like mine. I was about to start walking towards the doctor's office when Slenderman appeared behind me and pulled me down on my knees, where I was. What now? I asked. Do not follow him. That is Tim. He looked down at me, saying, Tim is interesting. He was what you have. That cough you have. I've been stalking him for a while and been very caught up with his friends. He's 20. He seems to have the same similar interests with me as you do," he said. "His friends hate me. Tim hates me, and they all do, and they all want me gone," he says. "I think you're all right," I told him, coughing violently. "Sure you do," he said, laughing. Slenderman barely held an emotion, but he managed to make me consider him as a friend. We both followed this Tim guy for a while. Slenderman got this weird-looking mask and left it around Tim's house. From time to time again, he would put it on and change his personality. He would hang out, and I named him Masky. We would do all sorts of crazy stuff together. I didn't know where Slenderman got this mask from, but when Tim puts it on, he's Masky, and when he takes it off, he's Tim. He doesn't remember anything he does when he's Masky. This way, he doesn't know his own name. So when he takes off the mask again, he's... We would do this so often until I turned 17. Then his friends started hating his other personality. His friend's ex-friend Alex is trying to kill me. Tim and this other guy named Jay, who always had a camera. I began to follow Alex and sleeping in this rundown hospital. I started carrying around a gun too. It's been like this for a while, and I don't exactly know where Slender is going with this. But I've been alone in this house so long that it might be kind of fun to play with these guys. I barely talk anymore. I've been breaking into Masky's house and stealing his pills. They help with the coughing, headaches, and little seizures I've been having. I can't exactly tell what side I'm on anymore. I want to help Tim and Jay with Alex and Slenderman, but Slenderman is my friend in a way. He took me in as one of his own. I don't know what battle to fight. I'm in the middle again. Just like my brother. Do I stay or do I go? It's been a year, and I'm going with this whole Marble Hornets crowd. Slenderman has plenty of proxies living with us now. I don't really talk to any of them, though. I felt weird around him. Jeff is somewhat new, and he came just a few months ago, just wandering around killing everyone. Ben came after smile.jpg, and there are lots more. I guess it's kind of nice to be around people who are similar to you. I stay in my room most of the time, though, especially watching someone on YouTube videos with Slender in them. They are funny because he doesn't want to kill them all. Just a few select. Everyone I live with is known on the internet as Creepypasta. I'm in there too. No one really knows my story, though, so it's kind of fine to me. But people like Jeff and Ben get written about a ton. I'm in a few of Jay's videos, which is probably why people know me. I just sit back in my chair and read. I still hold my knife with me and wear my keys all the time since the day I've had to go all through these things, including my brother's hoodie, which I wear the time around along with my mask, hanging out in my room alone. Just any normal. My name is Chloe. I'm a 22-year-old college student from Indianapolis, and I'm addicted to the internet. I keep a YouTube channel that I update every month with parodies of popular TV shows and the occasional video in which I address my viewers directly. Lately, however, something truly bizarre has been disturbing my channel. It was the morning after I had uploaded a new video to my channel. It had been a thank you to my viewers for helping me reach 100,000 subscribers, along with a montage of myself doing silly things for my fans that had suggested to me in the comments. So it came to a surprise when I checked how many views the video had and found it had more dislikes than likes. I had always put a lot of work into my videos. My subscribers were feisty loyal, so I failed to see how the video made specifically for them could receive so poorly. Looking through the comments, I saw dozens of phrases like, "I don't get it," and "What's this supposed to be?" When I scrolled back to the video, I realized it was not the video I had uploaded from last night. The video I uploaded was 5 minutes long with the title, "Thank You." The video on my screen was now 16 minutes long, and its title was just a timestamp. I went back to the previous page and saw that the real video was indeed on my channel, but the anomaly had been uploaded since then. Curious to see what it was, I clicked on the video and began to watch. My screen showed a girl busily typing away at her computer. Me. Nothing happened for the entire duration of the video, and it ended abruptly and without explanation. I realized I must have left my camera running while I was editing, thank you, and somehow uploaded the junk footage with the intended video. After posting a comment apologizing for my mistake, I grabbed my textbooks and went to school for the day. I would delete the video when I had time that evening. When I got home, I spent the next few hours finishing my homework and tidying my room. I ate a quick supper, gobbled together from random stuff in the fridge, and got right back to work on my channel. I glared with frustration at the screen when I found another unwanted video had been uploaded. This one was over 3 hours long. It began with me lying on the floor, flipping through a textbook. Later it showed me walking around my room, reorganizing my shelf, and picked up the clothes I had worn yesterday. Near the end of the video, I walked out of the room, probably to get some supper. What was going on with my computer? I had not even touched it since this morning. I had to do something about that camera. What would have been a matter of time before a video was posted of me changing my clothes or drying off in the shower. I reviewed all the errands on my laptop, trying to find the cancerous bit of code responsible for this accidental video. I must have gone through every program and file 3 times over, but everything seemed to be in order. I gave up around midnight. I had class at 8:30 in the next morning, and I needed sleep. I put a sheet of paper out of the front of my camera so that even if it uploaded another video, my viewers would not see anything I did not want them to see. Exhausted, I turned off the light and went to sleep. I checked my channel before school the next morning. For some reason, it was exploded with activity. Next time I clicked the refresh button, the latest upload on my channel had 100 new views. But how could a 6-hour video with a solid black thumbnail and a timestamp for a title be so popular? I started the video, but nothing appeared to be happening. I looked in the comments for an explanation. Have you lost it? Why would you post this? What happened to your old videos? Is this some kind of joke? I don't know what's going on. Reply. Did you see it? Reply. See what? Reply. 3018. Watch closely. I skipped half an hour into the video, staring hardly at the timidly dead screen. Suddenly, it looked like something was moving. It was a hardly visible black-on-black shift that only lasted for a few seconds. But when it was over, I could recognize the faint outlines in the darkness. It was my room. In the moment, it had been me. Shifting in my sleep, how could the camera have seen this? Was the paper I had put in front of it not thick enough? When the Chloe in the video shifted again, I froze. The camera angle in the video was different from the others. My bed could not be seen from my camera. This video had been taken from my bedroom window. We first met at a club. It wasn't the typical drink your way into a flirt with a stranger while hoping they come with you thing. We really connected. We exchanged numbers, dated for a few weeks, but she lost interest. I didn't, though. Now I wish I had. I was literally crazy about her. I couldn't get her out of my head and was willing to do anything to see her again. The problem was that she didn't want to see me. I didn't physically follow her at first. I was constantly checking her social media sites as she updated many times a day. When her personal site updates weren't enough to give me a fix, I started using my frequent check-ins to find her favorite places and started frequently visiting them myself, hoping to run into her. It worked a few times, but more often it didn't. That's when I started full-on following her, and my world became a nightmare. I had intentionally made it a rule not to go to her house. The last thing I wanted was for a neighbor to become suspicious and call the cops. I broke my own rule one night when I watched as she brought a random guy home from the bar. I was furious. I had every intention of telling this guy to fuck off when he had left her house. I sat in my car and seethed all night, but he didn't leave. The sun had just started to come up when I completely lost my mind and entered her house to confront them both. I climbed in through the downstairs window and crept to her bedroom on the 2nd floor. She was alone in her bed. I was sure he hadn't left, so I searched the house for him. He was in the basement, hung from a rope in a pulley system, upside down with his throat slit. I ran from the house and called the police. I confessed my crimes of stalking, breaking and entering while they arrested my now former obsession for a much more serious crime. I didn't think the situation could have been any more messed up. I was wrong. She was eating people. She confessed confessed pretty much right away, and they were able to confirm that she was telling the truth by testing the meat in her freezer. She would meet a guy, bring them home, drug them, and slaughter them. Four poor souls followed her home, like four poor horny puppies, and ended up on her menu. When I was given this information, it occurred to me that I couldn't remember her buying red meat when I followed her through the grocery store. Then I remembered the one time out on our dates when I went to her house and she had served me steak for dinner. You don't know me. No one knows me. Only Master knows of my existence. Master and I know all of you. We visit all of you, my friends, during the witching hour. I'm never there during the day. The sun's rays penetrate my shadowless soul and obliterate my flesh. My bones turn to ash and my organs become dust. Daytime in one place is nighttime in another, though. So Master and I are always traveling, never in one place for too long. After the sun has died and the moon lives again, I come. I'll get close up to you and breathe in the scent of your life. I listen to your heartbeat and breathing. Master then starts to work on you, putting one finger on your forehead and whispering Latin words. You always end up squirming or screaming. Master calls them nightmares. I'm always wanting to comfort you, hold you close, but I can never touch. Not ever. Master tells me never to touch. I've learned not to touch. Master hurts me badly. In my skin. My scared, sensitive skin has paid the price. But sometimes I can't help myself. When Master isn't looking, I strike. I brush my fingernails down your arm, trace your lips, comb your hair away from your face. But my skin kills your kind, breaks the blood vessels, bruises your body in mysterious ways you can never figure out. I'm sorry. I really am. I just can't help myself. I want to show you how much I love you. When Master and I are done with you, I always remember to take a souvenir. Usually it's something small that you won't notice is missing, like a coin or a pen, snatched up from behind Master's back. But sometimes you don't have very much. When that happens, I take something else, with Master's permission, of course. Hair, nails, eyelashes, a part of you, and it will always be mine. I hope to see you tonight, but if you don't fall asleep, we'll have a problem. Master says I can't let you see me. If you see me, our friendship will be over, and I'll have to kill you. I don't want to kill you. I don't want to see blood seep through your bed sheets. I don't want to see your face as you scream inside of me. My deformed skin, my scars, my love for you. But maybe deep down inside, just a little bit, I do. I am Master's child after all. Sweet dreams, darling. I'll be waiting for you. It was just like any other day on YouTube, searching through my subscription when I saw a video by Jacksepticeye. It was called jack.exe. Now I am a big fan of Jack and his videos, so I clicked on it. The video started off as any. He high-fived the screen and smiled, but something was wrong. The video was tinted red and the sound was messed up. I thought it was just a glitch with his monitor as I continued watching. Jack's voice was fine until I got deeper into the video and a faint scream was heard. Like a boss was repeated in the background. Jack's head turned and was facing me. Like a boss, he screamed. I threw off my headphones. I watched way too many creepypasta, I thought to myself, and walked to the kitchen. When I came back, something was different. The video was different. Jack had his webcam, and all but his eyes were bleeding, and the game was wrong. It showed my house. And I thought to myself, this can't be happening, until I glanced back at the screen. Instead of in front of my house, it was in the hall. I screamed and ran into the closet. That's where I am now. I hear footsteps. Oh God, he's right at the
Leg up us! And hi-fi's all round!
That night was cold, very cold. I ran through the streets cleverly and swiftly. I reached the top of a tall building and perked up upon the city. I took off my mask and looked down on the busy roadways. I'm not sure why I still wore the mask even though my face was healed. The mask had become a part of me, a part of my story. I sat down on the rooftops and turned in my radio to the local police station. I sat for hours trying to find calls on the murders that may have been linked to Jeff. After 9 years since that night Jeff burned me, I was still on the search to hunt and kill him. I finally heard the anticipated call. A woman and her husband were found dead in their home with holes in their chests and gashes in their cheeks forming smiles. I turned off the radio, putting on my mask, and sprinted to the scene. Police haven't arrived yet, so I investigated. Jeff had a habit of calling the authorities just before visiting his victims, so he may still be at the scene. Upon arrival, the house is completely intact, which is odd for Jeff. Normally, he burns the house with the victims. I barged inside and heard nothing but still silence. In the back of the house, I heard a faint tapping. I headed to the back of the house. I grabbed the doorknob of the back door and slowly turned it with sweaty, stressed palms. I squinted my eyes as I opened it, expecting something to jump out or something or someone to lunge at me. The door opened all the way, and my eyes were still closed for some reason. Then I heard it. The voice, that same voice I heard on the night he burned me, only deeper and more into manhood. Looks like you made it. I'm glad you did, friend. I opened my eyes and grabbed my knife. Killing is too easy, especially for me with a face that stuns everyone with my beauty. I open the window, jump inside, and the civilians just stop in their tracks when they see me. I always mutter, go to sleep in an attack. Killing is a lot easier when the person is asleep. Why do I kill? Simple. I want everyone to be as beautiful as me. Everyone in modern society is ugly and unattractive compared to me, and I feel bad for them, so I give them a piece of my beauty. However, beauty comes with a price. The only way to make people beautiful without causing them pain is to kill them. Killing was too easy avoiding around this time. I needed more of a challenge, so one night I decided to end one last easy target, then I head for the most challenging foe of mine, Jane. I sat in the sewers during the day and watched the people pass by, completely oblivious to my presence below the sewer gate. I always lurk down there. It's cold, damp, and dark. Plus, it gives me a perfect window to set my eyes on my target. Then I found her, Mary J. Allen. She was beautiful, perfect skin, dark red hair, and dressed in a black gown with black heels. Later that night, I followed her home. She lived deep in the woods, so thinking she was protected from robbers, she left the door unlocked. At around midnight, I snuck in the house, creeped to the back room, and choked Mary until she passed out. One thing that caught my attention was her eyes. When she turned around before I grabbed her, her eyes widened with fear. Her pupils grew large and her iris dimmed. Not long after, her husband arrived home. I took my knife in hand and hid behind the door, entering the bedroom. As soon as he walked into the doorway, I slammed the door into his face, enough force to knock him out. A few hours later, they both woke up. Who are you? Why are you doing this to us? We have no money and nothing worth stealing, said Mary. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this for beauty. What kind of reason is that? Asked the husband. I put the knife to his neck and he jumped with sudden fear. His eyes, they did just what Mary's did. They widened, the pupils grew large, and the iris dimmed. A good reason, I chuckled. Now let's give you a smile. I stabbed the man in his left cheek and carved it into him all the way to his mouth. His screams in pain were only joy to my ears. I carved the other cheek and stood in front of Mary. Your turn, I said, stabbing her right cheek, and dragged the knife all the way to the other side of her cheek. There. Step 1 of the makeover is complete. Now for the skin. But first, let's call the police, shall we? I said, picking up the phone, dialing 911. I reported the crime and hung up. I then took a bottle of bleach from their bathroom and poured the entire bottle onto them. I didn't let them match, but I decided why. Because I'm doing this. I'm gonna need this place for my battle with Jane, of course. To replace burning them, I decided to cut out their hearts instead. I started with Mary and plunged the knife deep into her chest. I used all my might to cut a hole into her and rip her heart out. Blood was all over the floor, and Mary was dead, but the man was still living. His screams and cries only motivated me to kill him more painfully than his wife. Stop, please. I'll do anything you want me Anything you want me to do? Just please don't kill me, he said. There's nothing you can do now, I said as I plunged my knife into his chest, but slower than Mary. I made sure that I twisted the blade as it went before I could begin cutting the hole. The body went limp. Well, that's no fun. You can't just die before I'm done killing you. Oh well, it only gives me more time to prepare for my battle with Jane, I said. I cleaned the blood off my blade and got myself mentally prepared for the battle, so I knew that Jane would be listening to the police radios. About 3 minutes later, I heard the front door open. This is it, I thought. I quirked my knife and caught Jane's attention by tapping faintly on the window. A few seconds later, the doorknob turned and the door opened. Jane, more beautiful than ever, stood in the doorway. I gripped my knife and prepared for the battle of a lifetime. It's gonna take a lot more than that to bring me down, Jeff, I said. I stepped on the handle of my knife with force, flinging it up into my hand. I stabbed Jeff in the neck, but he ignored it and continued to stab me. I managed to push him off, and I began to kick him as hard as I could. When he looked as though he had enough, I knelt down and ran the tip of my knife along his curved smile. That's too bad. I thought this was going to be more exciting and much harder than this. Oh well, at least I completed my life's goal, I said. Jane, don't do this. We could be partners. The two greatest killers in history. Teamed up. We can make everyone beautiful like us. Never. Not after what you've done, I said. Jeff swooped his foot around and kicked me in the face. I flew across the room and hit the wall. Jeff stood up and walked over to me. You're nothing in comparison to me, Jane. I am a god. I am immortal, he said. No, Jeff, you're not a god. Gods are beautiful. And you're hideous, I said, struggling to stand. Jeff is brimmed with rage after that statement. I shouldn't have let you live. I had so many opportunities to end you. Now here is where it all ends. Let the better killer win. I looked at Jen and her beautiful face. My mind was buzzing with images of cuts all over her body and drenched in her own blood. I only smiled wider as she made a perfect slash on my neck. I could feel the warm blood gush down my chest. You caught me off guard, I said, barely able to speak. I blanked out the wound and grabbed Jane's neck to choke her. She put both of her feet on my chest and pushed me with all her might. My hand slipped, then I let her go. I've had enough time to train, Jeff. It's been 9 years, fighting police officers and pathetic men trying to protect their families. It's been good practice, she said. Not enough, I said as I lunged at her from the side. I slipped my knife into her stomach and twisted it around. She did not seem to respond to the pain. All she did was stare into the dark of the room, which was only illuminated by moonlight. After seconds that felt like hours, I saw red and blue flashing lights. I took out my knife and saw Jane limp to the floor dead. Guess I won, Jane. I waited until Jeff turned around, then I quietly raised myself up and grabbed my knife. I threw it at Jeff's back, directly in his spinal cord. He fell to the ground paralyzed. I took out the knife and rolled his body over. He muttered words, but I couldn't hear them. I looked into his unblinking eyes and saw nothing but darkness behind them. I raised my knife only one last time. For some reason, a tear formed in my eye. Jane, I could hear him mutter. Before I could finish him, something ignited in his eye, something I'd never seen before. All of time came to a halt. The police lights outside froze, and the clock in the room stopped. Jeff rose from the ground. I told you, Jane. I'm a god, he said. No, you're a demon, I said quickly, lashing out at Jeff, but he grabbed my arm and broke it. I screamed out in agony. What's the difference? He said. I backed away from him, unable to use my right arm. The sky outside turned a bright red. The clouds held orange, stationary bolts of lightning. This was no ordinary battle. This was a battle between good and evil. The ultimate clash of supremacy. That's when I realized Jeff planned this. He's a demon. He's been building an army of souls. You're feeding off of them. You're taking their pain, grief, and anger, turning it into fuel. You sick, twisted creature, I said. You're smart, he said sarcastically. Took you long enough to figure it out. I thought you were much better than that, Jane. You have the souls of thousands of victims, but I have the souls of our families, I said. The souls of our families and Jeff's. appeared behind me, illuminating a blue light. Behind Jess appeared rows and rows of children, men and women, glowing a deep red. My mother gave me much of her happiness to heal my arm. Jeff's brother gave me the bravery to stand up to Jeff one last time. My father gave me his hope to heal my stab wounds. You're no match for me now, Jeff. One good soul can stand above 1,000,000 evil souls, I said. That's where you're wrong, said Jeff. He began to absorb the souls of his victims. Yes, more. I ran up to him and swung my knife at him, but he blocked it, and when our knives touched, they turned out a purple spark. Jeff's knee was bent, so I took advantage and stepped my foot on it, then pushed up and flipped backwards, letting my feet extend and kicked Jeff in the chin. When I landed, Jeff instantly slashed my face, but Jeff's mother healed it for me. I took a quick swing at Jeff, but he grabbed my knife and threw it across the room. He cut my throat and pushed me against the wall, raising me up. I couldn't do anything but try my hardest to kick him. My body flowed around, desperately trying to escape. The room began to spin and get dark. Go to sleep, said Jeff. I held on my last grab of consciousness only to let it go. Before I could go into a deep sleep, I got a sudden burst of energy and managed to kick Jeff hard enough to make him let go and fall to the ground. I slid down on the wall and walked over to him. I'm done with you. It's time for you to die, I said. No, he said, grabbing my arm. Good has always won. It's time for evil to prevail. I kicked Jeff again and picked up my knife. You have been defeated, Jeff. Accept it, I said. Jeff the killer, you are Satan's most wanted in hell. We now banish you to this realm, to this place where you belong. All of Jeff's victims and families said in unison. The souls gathered around him and put their hands up. The ground around Jeff began to crack and fall into fire. Eventually, only a small platform was holding Jeff up. Please, no, he said. Jeff, go to sleep, I said. Just one final platform broke and sent Jeff plummeting into the hell during this descent. Jeff screamed the same way he did when he was being burnt alive at the party 9 years ago. I promised I'd make him scream like that again, and I have. The floorboards rebuilt themselves, and the souls turned to me. All of them in unison said, Thank you, Jane. You have freed us from the curse of Jeff the Killer. As a reward, we will bind your mask to your face, so you won't ever have to deal with it again. The mask was fused to my face, and my eyes turned a deep black. Thank you, I said. The souls faded, and the sky turned to normal. I jumped out of the window, making sure to dodge the cops before the time came back on, because I still had a criminal record to worry about. 4 years later. Jeff the Killer is dead. All the cases went cold. Police stopped searching for him, and they stopped searching for me as well. The battle between good and evil still rages, but mine and Jeff's part in the war is over. Our legendary battle was good prevails. I have a husband and 2 kids now, and we're a very happy family. Will I ever murder again? Perhaps, if anyone hurts me before the time came back on, because I still had a criminal record to worry about. 4 years later. Jeff the Killer is dead. All the cases went cold. Police stopped searching for him, and they stopped searching for me as well. The battle between good and evil still rages, but mine and Jeff's part in the war is over. Our legendary battle was good prevails. I have a husband and 2 kids now, and we're a very happy family. Will I ever murder again? Perhaps. If anyone hurts my new family, I will not hesitate. The dark, wet alley was slightly illuminated by Sarah's cell phone light, as she shined it every few seconds to see where she was headed. Her eyes scanned the darkness, and she shook crazily. What happened to her last night was a mystery. She thought back at the bar. She had just came in with some friends, and just for a fun night. Nothing could have happened, or so she thought. Now she was trembling, walking from building to building at 3 in the morning. Again, she thought back, but everything was a blur. She passed an old ratty motel and a pub. Sarah made her way to the outskirts of her neighborhood, around a heavily wooded area. She walked, clenching her eyes shut tightly for moments at a time. She was huddled in her coat for warmth as the cold rain covered her in what seemed like an eternity. Just as her eyelids took cover of her eyes, something shined out of the corner of her vision. She instantly flashed her eyes open again, and her pupils became wide. She looked around. Nothing stood out in the darkness and rain. She spun around and continued her way back, hoping she would make it home. As she studied her surroundings, she remembered a shortcut that she took as a kid when playing hide and seek with her childhood playmates. It involved climbing through the woods. The cold woman hesitated, but came to the decision that anything that would get her to her warm home quicker is a better way. Sarah headed towards the forest. As she made her way in, the first tree she laid eyes on had been marked. What was on the marking on the tree mystified her. It looked like a circle with an X inside. She knew nothing of its origin or meaning, so she just assumed that it was some kind of gang symbol or something of the sort. Making her way into the forest, she recalled the fun times she had as a kid. She thought to herself out loud, I miss those times. Back when the world was her voice trailed off. Sarah heard a loud crack of a tree off in the distance behind her. Terrified, she began running through the woods, and she soon became lost. She continued anyway, hoping to find her way out. Her lacking of caution quickly resulted in her leg being caught on a near-lying root, and she fell to the ground. Attempting to get up caused her even more pain. She twisted her ankle. Somebody, please! Somebody help me! She called out. The crunching of the leaves became present again. She attempted to stand and run once again, but her injury kept her in place. She clenched her eyes shut out of fear. As she opened them again, a tall, white man dressed in a suit stood before her. She became visually impaired at the sight of the man. She began screaming in terror, but was soon silenced by the slender, pale man that stood before her in the dark. 4 o'clock. What once was a young boy was now a cold-blooded psychopath. Jeff the killer had just finished what he called his daily rounds. The slaughtering of innocent people that was almost all that flooded Jeff's mind. He dragged his feet up the wet cement as he entered what he had called his home for years. Jeff stepped foot into a world of tragic memories, clutching 2 whiskey bottles in his hand. Jeff had become a drunken killing machine. His brain was filled with a sense of murder. One thought did cross his psychopathic mind there since day one. As rain hit the Wary house, Jeff began to recall the night of which he slaughtered his entire family. He chuckled at the thought. It wasn't for his sanity. He may have thought about regret, remorse for taking the lives of the people he once loved, but that wasn't possible at this point. Jeff was out for one thing, and only one thing: death. 5 o'clock in the morning, he took another swing at his alcohol. What in the fuck am I sitting here for? Jeff buzzed. As he got up to make his way into the night, he swerved a bit and took another chug at his whiskey. The alcohol hit his warm, bloody lips, and he felt an odd sensation. A sudden urge had hit him. He stood in the room, gazing out at the forest behind his house. He checked his pockets, cigarettes, a lighter, and of course his knife. Jeff knew that something wasn't right. The feeling he got was a mix of the urge to kill again and something far different from what he had felt before. He stormed out of his home into the cold, wet night. Jeff was now in the dark street, his only source being a lamp illuminating the road. The rain still pouring hit Jeff's back. He started to move in the direction of the forest. He struggled a bit. His alcohol composition that night had been extremely high. The killer approached his desolation forest. Before he entered, he took a quick glare to his left. Jeff was not far from a cemetery. He trembled towards it. A thought blew into his mind, almost like the wind of a breezy afternoon. The last piece of his family was only a few feet away, and it beckoned him. He moved his feet away from the forest and towards the graveyard. Slowly Jeff walked, yet he tripped a few times, spanning the short distance. He approached the grave. Jeff glanced at it with the odd odor of death, his jacket being covered in blood and the remains of his victims. Jeff simply glanced at the cold slab of granite. His vision was too distorted to make out any sort of words. Because of this, he just stood and stared. Jeff's insides began to feel uneasy, and his throat became dry, the same feeling just minutes before. Jeff stumbled back to the forest while trembling towards the woodland. His eyes wandered to a tree a few feet further than the others. What looked like a small grayish piece of paper could be seen hanging by a nail. His eyes blurred. He was unable to read it. He took no attempt either, and crept into the darkness slowly, almost as if he recognized this place, as if it was his true home. Squeezing his 2 whiskey bottles, he studied the forest into a darkening haze. Jeff admired the darkness. It reminded him of a black alleyway. one where the murderer could easily slash the neck of his victims without being seen. As he continued walking, Jeff became in the way frosted. The empty blackness swirled around him, muttering to himself in unrecognizable gibberish. He continued to trot. Something felt a bit odd. The crunching of leaves seemed too loud to account for only one person. Jeff felt as if something was lurking behind his line of sight. "Who's there?" Jeff growled. An ambulance of noise could be heard, but nothing out of the ordinary. Chirps and crickets grew louder as Jeff studied his surroundings. "Come on, chicken. I don't really like games and not hide-and-seek at all." As Jeff announced this, a quick rustling from a nearby bush could be heard. He slashed at it before the sound could be silenced of his own. Jeff then saw what was hidden out of his sight this entire time. "Damn rat! You're just good-for-nothing pest," Jeff proclaimed as the rodent scurried from the leaves. After he had seen what was hidden in the bush, he continued his midnight stroll. The rain crashing against his back came to a slow stop. His vision became very blurry, and a loud noise was growing in his head. What could be heard from a figment of Jeff's insane imagination, for the woods were completely silent. He tampered around, dragging his feet and cursing at the almost unbearable noise. Nothing like it had pierced his ears with such discount before. The noise that drowned Jeff became very absent. From the pain, Jeff fell to a tree. Both bottles that were once clenched to his hands fell towards the ground. One crashed against the bark and shattered everywhere. The cracks of glass had vigorously dragged Jeff back into his consciousness. As his eyes readjusted to the darkness once more, the blurriness was magnified as Jeff saw a white overall-like object hovering above him. His eyes quickly focused from shock, but what had been in front of him a few seconds ago was nowhere to be found. "What the fuck was that?" Jeff chuckled at his own remark. Was his mind playing tricks on him? "Now I know that ain't no damn rat." He hesitantly came to the conclusion that something had been lurking in the darkness, following him from a distance. "That's it. I'm done playing games. Where the fuck are you, bastard?" Jeff screamed to the top of his lungs and hoped that some kind of response. He was answered abruptly as he turned to walk again, and he felt the slightest tingle in his neck. "That's not the damn man, fucker. Get the hell out of the bushes before I decide to fuck you up." Jeff felt wind at this point. Nothing about this place was right, but he was enjoying every single minute of it. Swiftly, he pulled his shining blade out of his coat pocket and began slashing at the trees in the darkness. "Come on out, you bitch!" he cried out. "No hiding now. I'll cut every last chip of bark to slit your throat." Jeff pointed his knife towards a tall, thin tree protruding from the left of his vision and stabbed it. He was astonished to see that in one direct contact, the tree, or what he thought was a tree, faded away into the darkness in a matter of milliseconds. Not knowing what to do, he glanced quickly towards his right, instead the black of night. He peered out the woods and saw not what he expected. He stood there. The psychotic boy was an extremely tall, thin man dressed in a clean black suit. This was all that Jeff could make out at the time. The rain caused Jeff's sight to become more immediately disoriented. Jeff's eyes had cleared again, and he quickly began to observe the man. He was ematic. His pale face was almost pure white in color. As Jeff studied his face, he soon came to notice the lack of features on this man. This thing's face was completely empty. No eyes, no nose or mouth. At a white blank head, this made Jeff feel a bit uneasy, and he soon broke out to laughter. Although astonished, Jeff soon addressed the figure before him. "So you're the bastard chasing me through the woods, huh?" Jeff stared at the blackness once more. "You know, I don't know what the fuck you are, but you kind of remind me of myself. You got the nice white face, but all you're missing is a smile." Jeff began laughing uncontrollably at his own notion, yet he was stopped. Jeff's ears were assaulted by static, and he fell to the ground. This was shuddered in complete darkness as he clenched his ears for mercy. The figure Jeff early questioned was now causing Jeff extreme pain, while the place where his eyes should have been staring directly into Jeff's. At the point, Jeff snapped. He broke free of the pain and drew his knife once more and began slashing. Each one of his moves were futile, as the man moved around in no time at all, almost as if he was teleporting from place to place to avoid attacks. The tall being began to fight back. Jeff had just now begun to notice the tendrils hanging from the back of his attacker. They grabbed at Jeff, and his response was to swing his knife at what came near him. Jeff managed to slice what seemed to be an arm. In almost an instant, the limb grew quickly back in place. For what had happened astonished Jeff. He felt almost as if the man was a tall tree and his tendrils simply branches. Jeff fled the forest, knowing that there was no way he would be able to fight whatever his adversary truly was in what seemed to be his home territory. Jeff rushed from his attacker and found himself at the same spot where he had entered. To the right of him lay the cemetery, open space. As he ran past the trees, he noticed that lie away from the others, the same tree from before. He ran it out of instinct and read the note had seen from a distance before. Do not enter these woods at night. A tall man has been spotted in the area recently. Some call him Slenderman. Beware and enter at your own risk. Whatever the being had stalked him from the woods before was referred to as Slenderman. The name fit perfectly as the description of a tall white figure. Jeff hurried towards the graveyard where he waited for his foe, wielding his sharp, bloody knife. Jeff's wish had been granted as the Slenderman approached from the woods. It seemed as if it was hesitant to leave its home court. Despite its hesitance, it left the area anyway and quickly rushed towards Jeff. The psychopath instinct started to kick back, and he jumped towards the tall man. Jeff was quickly grabbed by his enemy and thrown against a nearby tree. Jeff proceeded to swing again at the tendrils and then grabbed him. He was able to slash at one of the Slenderman's main arms. Blood oozed from the deep cut. The white figure showed no emotion and began to scratch at Jeff once again. As he continued to smash Jeff against trees and stab rocks, Jeff's knife slipped from his grip and fell to the ground with Jeff colliding with the ground. Jeff's knife slid into his own stomach in a matter of seconds. Blood poured from the wound, and soon to the ground was covered in a red liquid. He stood up with a jolt. Is this the best you got, Slendy? I've taken worse beatings from my father's belt than your weak twig arms. The slender man remained silent, but continued fighting. The man reached for a piece of granite from a tombstone, but before he could take a hold of it, Jeff jerked the knife from his gut and flung it directly at Slenderman. Jeff's accuracy was precise, and it sliced off one of the main limbs. Slenderman's left arm was completely gone, as it fell to the ground with a thud. It was quickly met with thick blood as it drained from his shoulder. It was completely drenched in blood. Slenderman briskly disappeared into the darkness, but illuminated behind Jeff, in his right hand, he had a piece of granite that he proceeded to slam into the side of Jeff's head. Jeff fell to the ground once again, almost knocked unconscious. He was not left there for long before he was seized by his assailant and thrown against the grave. The stone exploded on impact with Jeff. Standing up once again, Jeff's eyes focused on the name of the grave. As his eyes crossed the name of the grave, his black eyes widened. The words written across the gray stab was recognized by Jeff in an instant. It read out his brother's name, Lou. Something was coursing through Jeff. Rage filled with an instant, and he lashed out at Slenderman at extreme speeds. Jeff's knife was slashing through his suit as well as his pale skin. Slenderman began teleporting towards the force. Come on, bitch. I'm not finished with you yet. I want to help you go to sleep, Randy. You look awfully tired. Whatever was flowing through Jeff caused his insanity to go overdrive state. He had become delusional. He ran at Slenderman and back into the forest. He rushed through the woods, not observing his environment whatsoever. Jeff was deep into the forest, still piercing the man. Slenderman continued wrapping around the forest. Jeff's lack of caution caused him to trip on a branch lying in his way. As he crashed to the ground, shards of glass pierced him, and the contents of his pocket were flown out. The items scattered to the ground as Jeff looked up with his mangled, bloody face. The scent of alcohol graced him. Jeff knew he had been here before. He had fallen on the tree and dropped his bottle. Jeff desperately searched the ground for his knife. He felt his hand grab a hold of something worn. What wrapped around Hope was his blade. Jeff grabbed his Jeff had grabbed his lighter. He quickly scraped at it, hoping that a small flame would provide a source of light. His bloody hands covered the plastic in the red liquid. After many desperate attempts, a small orange flame was produced. Jeff threw the lighter out in front of him as he attempted to find his knife that lay close to him. Before he could make another movement, Slenderman suddenly appeared before him. The smooth white face that had been seen was now covered in slashes and dark blood. Even though he looked hurt, Slenderman remained strong. Jeff's grip on the lighter became loose. His blood had caused friction between it and his hand. The small blaze dropped towards the ground. Instant flames scorched through the lighter hit the ground. Both advisors fled away from the flame. Before either of them could put their distance between themselves and the flame, it was ignited by the alcohol that soiled the ground. In a matter of seconds, the forest was burning up. Jeff looked for safety, but yet none was found in the flames. Slenderman thought nothing of this and continued to swing at Jeff. Jeff fought back, ignoring the orange and red covering his environment. The tall monster grabbed at Jeff. Jeff grabbed his knife and jumped. To no avail, Jeff was pulled by the Slenderman and was now stuck in his grip. Slenderman began to shake Jeff off as he did this. Jeff bit at him and a loud crack of bone became heard. The pain surged through Slenderman at a shock, and he threw it against Jeff at a large tree. As Jeff flew towards the tree, a sharp pain hit Jeff's back. It continued. He saw a large branch slide through his torso, and he hit the base of the tree. Jeff had been viciously impaled by a large tree branch. Blood gushed through his mouth and open wound as he screamed out in pain. Slenderman then fled. He ran to an area of safety where the forest had been not burned as of yet. He watched Jeff as he attempted to escape. At this point, the Slenderman knew that escape was impossible. The white monster could hear Jeff screaming even from a large distance away. He continued to wrap around from his territory and left Jeff to burn in the flames. The blaze became brighter and surrounded Jeff. Struggling to avoid the intense heat, he violently slid his body from the tree. Fire engulfed Jeff. Everything swirled around him. He became wrapped up into the flames. There was no hope for Jeff. He had lost his mind long ago. Yet this was different. He had reached his limit, and his state of mind burned just as the forest did. A young lady by the name of Sarah Burgress had been reported missing, and she has last seen at the Drop-In Bar and Grill at around 9 o'clock p.m. If you have any idea on the whereabouts of Sarah Burgess, please call the home station at 404-835-HELP. In other news, a major forest fire has the remains of the forest. The fire had been extinguished. This will hurt much of the animal life found in the once heavy wooded forest. We'll bring more in the story as it comes. Mark turned off the TV and slumped at the couch cushion. Hey honey, you want to go take a look at the forest? Well, that's left of it. They put the fire out that burned that damn thing to good. There's also a missing girl. Maybe we'll find her while we're there. Can we do it some other time? I'm kind of busy right now, Mark. And if the police can't find that girl, there's no way in hell we can. Julia protested. Mark argued, come on, it won't hurt anything. It wouldn't be more than a 5-minute walk. All right, I guess, but 5 minutes only. The man put on his shoes and left his house with his wife. As they strolled towards the burnt house, they could see something moving in the opposite direction. It looked somewhat human. As they moved closer towards it, they noticed that it looked like it had several burns on its face. The face was completely white, the hints of gray where it looked like it had been burnt. Its long black hair was mingled. They came closer towards it and Mark shouted, Hey buddy, do you need some help? Mark bellowed. Mark, stop. We don't even know who he is. He could be a fucking killer for all we know, Julia whispered, frightened. The man moved swiftly towards the couple. As he approached them, he drew a quick blade over covered in red liquid. I don't. But I can tell you need help to sleep. Jeff slashed the knife across the man's neck and he fell to the ground. His wife began to scream loudly. She was unable to continue as she was next. She was stabbed directly in the heart with the knife. You don't need to worry about me. Just go to sleep. I bolted upright in the bed, not sure what I expected to see, but knowing that something had startled me awake. Moonlight flittered in through the window and I shivered despite the unseasonably warm temperature. After a few moments, I heard it, a soft tapping of fingers against the glass. Slowly, I turned my head to the window, expecting to see some horrible creature lurking with sharp fangs and terrible claws. but there was nothing. There wasn't even wind to knock the branches against the window. Cautiously, I slid out of the bed and looked out the window, feeling relieved to see that there was nothing outside. Just hearing things, I murmured to myself, coming back to bed. I wasn't used to sleeping alone, but my partner was away on business. Surely just a change in routine startling me. Moments before getting into the bed, I heard the tapping again, slightly louder this time, less hesitant. I spun around, sandy blonde curls sticking to my suddenly sweaty brow. The window was clear. A still and empty sky allowed the moon to illuminate the ground below, revealing no one or thing outside. This time a loud banging behind me, like fist pounding on glass trying to escape. Against my better judgment, I crossed my bedroom to the bathroom, resting my hand against the warm wooden door before pushing gently. A bit of moonlight spilled into the room, nothing different or odd, nothing jumping out, but I shivered again and leaned over to the candle I knew would be to my left. The warm glow seemed brighter than normal, and I jumped when I caught my reflection. It's just me, I trailed off as the me in the mirror raised its hand before flashing white fangs and shattering the glass. There was a short period while I was in high school that still gave me the chills. I remember it like it was yesterday. Everything seemed so normal, and then something changed. Days went by, and I began to have trouble sleeping. My room was in the basement, and it was already a little eerie. The whole floor was away from an exterior entrance that could allow anyone to break in, possibly unbeknownst to my family. I woke up in a panic one night. A sound had awoken me. I lay still, trying not to breathe, and listened to the sound that had broken my sleep. Suddenly, I heard it, a quiet, evil-sounding laugh. I closed my eyes tightly, telling myself I had imagined it. But I heard it again, an eerily childlike laugh that sounded very nearby. I convinced myself that I was just half asleep and was finally able to doze off. When I woke up the next morning, it seemed like a dream, and I had brushed it off. Days later, I had woken up again in the middle of the night by a loud crash in my room. I jumped awake, panicked and breathing heavily. I peered into the darkness, wondering what could have possibly made that sound. Suddenly, I heard the laughter again. This time it seemed to be coming across the room. I listened closely. I heard another sound, even more bone-chilling than the laughter. Footsteps, small and quick, but very distant. I jumped from my bed and flipped on the light switch. As the light hit my eyes, I squinted and peered around the room. That's when I noticed what had made the sound that had woken me. On my desk, I had set a jar filled with pencils, and it had been tipped over. The pencils were strewn all over the desk. It was a heavy jar. It could not have fallen over without being touched. I grabbed the pillow from my bed and bolted out of my room and up the stairs. Something was happening in that room. As I nestled into the couch outside my parents' bedroom, I felt much safer and at ease. I began replaying the events of the past few nights and trying to come up with a logical explanation. But suddenly, it hit me. The only variable factor that could have caused the things to happen. Days prior, I had invited my boyfriend over on New Year's Eve. Moments before he had arrived, I realized my magic attic club doll, Rose, was sitting in plain sight in my room. I hastily tossed her under the bed and so she wouldn't be seen. We rang the New Year's, and I didn't give it another thought to the doll under my bed. The doll under my bed. Could it possibly be? The next day I found Rose lying underneath my bed, but something seemed odd. She was lying on her side and almost seemed to be looking at me when I knelt down. I quickly removed her and placed her back on the shelf where she had been previously lived. I slept soundly that night, and every night after that. As terrifying as it is to admit or believe, I didn't find it to be a coincidence. Everyone has that toy at some point in their lives they imagine are alive. But what if they really are? The house was packed, the crowd abuzz, for the magician's biggest show, for tonight was the trick that he had promised, was sure to make minds blow. He toured the gallery a bit, a sly look on his face, then introduced his beautiful wife and assistant, the lovely Grace. No gaze upon your eyes, upon this extraordinary in no way. But with this trunk and my gorgeous wife, we'll make magic here today. He gestured the woman into the box, then went around the back. In the shock of everyone's face, pulled out a saw from his sack. For the amazing trick I prepare for you, I run my saw right through my wife in the box, cutting them both in two. The room was filled with gasping groans as he sliced and carved down the trunk. He sewed the box till his blade reached the bottom, stopping with a clunk. The faces in the crowd went white. He had the audience amazed. He pushed the box apart in two. The room's tension had been raised. And now I will complete my trick and open up this box. Now please be warned, the magician said. This will knock your socks off. The sly magician unhitched the latch and opened up the door. Then Grace's guts and small intestines spilled out onto the floor. There you have it, the magician said. An escape of tour de force. The name of this trick, if you wanted to know, I call it the divorce.
I don't quite feel like myself. I've been having strange dreams lately. But now you're here. And I'll make you feel right at home. Enjoy your stay.
It was a normal day as I watched some of Markiplier's YouTube videos. Then it happened. My computer and monitor froze, and I could still hear Mark's voice, and then my computer restarted itself. Then a message popped up on my desktop and said, "You're next." Yet, in some sort of way, I paid it no mind until a picture of Markiplier showed up. His eyes were pitch black with red pupils, and he had a smile of Jeff, and his pink mustache was all bloody. And as I looked closely, something grabbed me, and I then found myself in a Slender game. And as I looked up, I noticed that the title said Markiplier is coming for you, and I saw blood everywhere, and I was shocked to see Wade and Bob's body, but in pieces, and Yami Mash's head was hanging from a tree. So I ran as fast as I could. Then it hit me. Why and how is Mark even doing this? Then I heard a simple noise. Over here. I slowly turned around and saw what looked like Mark, but it wasn't till he came from behind me and said this simple but creepy words. Let's play hide and seek in Slender Woods. Smiling so creepy, I froze and collapsed, waking up in a small room full of bones and blood. All I could see were bones and blood. I had to find a way out, but I was trapped in what seemed to be looking at me, and what was wrote on the wall was something in blood. Come play with me. I shook my head, and he was gone, and an opening was behind me to my surprise. I ran into Venturin and homeless Goomba. Both of them were frightened and scared. As Mark came in through the open window, he blocked off our way and took his knife and sliced my arm off, Ventura's leg off, and homeless Goomba's head. As I bled out, Mark laughed, but creepy and evil Ventura passed out. Mark said, I am eternal, and sliced my head off. As I woke in my room, I couldn't help but remember those eyes that smile, and the laugh. I found no info on what happened to Mark. As I heard a low voice, I looked at my monitor and Mark's video of him playing Slender 8 pages and said, "Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!"
Okay, alright, enough of that.
Why would you want to go anywhere else? This is the only place you'll need to be. I'm the only one you need to watch.
Nerd, geek, hacker. I'm labeled with so many things you could call me Post-it note. My name is Chris, and I live in California in the middle of nowhere. I'm currently 22 years old, and my favorite classes is technology, or really anything to do with numbers. So you should know I love using binary to stamp my friend Alyssa. It's really funny to see her try and figure it out. It's around 1:30 in the morning, and I am watching a scary video on YouTube. I came up to a channel called Toothark, weird name, but I clicked on a video called Extracting, and there was a figure with a white mask on it that had black lips, black eyebrows, and black eye sockets. I was so scared, and the message in the video made no sense. So I scrolled into similar videos, and there was one with the channel name, Marble Hornets. I clicked on a video. It was called Entry 18, I think. The same figure was in it with a buddy. This made no sense. I had to go to bed. I was so tired, it wasn't even funny. I felt the presence of something. I just didn't know what. When I woke up the next morning, there were drawings all over the wall and a doll that looked similar to the tall, pale as a snowman. I was a little scared, and then I also found a tape that was meant to be watched as it stated on the back saying, "Watch me." So I went to the store and bought a tape recorder and hooked it up to my television. The tape was a video of Alyssa exploring what looked like the woods around my house. She turned the camera to herself and said to the camera, "Oh my gosh, I'm so freaking scared." The camera glitched, and so I couldn't hear what she said. She continued with the visual interruption. "He's coming after me." Interrupting again. I followed her. I heard her stop walking, her eyes widened. "Found you." The camera was dropped, and Alyssa was screaming, "Get away! Get away! No!" She was cut off by a sharp cracking. A good 15 minutes passed by, and I was surprised the tape lasted that long. Suddenly, there was a high-pitched screeching sound, and I covered my ears in agony. It was the camera glitching again. Man, this camera is horrible. I saw that the camera had been picked up, and it was turned to Alyssa. Her neck snapped and blood seeping from it. Then it snapped to some masked figure I saw in the video last night. It looked as if it had a seizure, and then opened the door to my house, and then the door to my house busted open, where it seemed. My heart was beating a mile a second, and I grabbed my minigun, Magnum. I hid under my desk in duct tape pocket, and I yelled, "Who's there?" in a loud voice. The lights shut off, creeping me out slightly. I felt hands grab me from behind, and I shot, hitting a foot. That was not my own. I heard a scream, and I hit the guy with the butt of the Magnum, and he recoiled, but then he tackled me. I got punched in the face, and I yelled as the man grabbed the gun out of my hand and threw it across the room. He put his hands to my throat, crushing my windpipe. I gasped for air and slapping his wrist. I passed out. The last thing I saw was him taking off his jacket and kicking me in the gut. "This character matches up with his letters," Chris said, pointing and looking at the masked figure. I nodded and patted her on the back. He turned and looked at the time. He sighed. I looked back at her, jerking his head towards the door. Chris nodded and quickly put on his brownish hood and put the black cloth over her face. It was designed with 2 red dots for eyes and a line for a frown. Oh yeah. Sorry for your foot, Tim," Chris said, sniggering and turning to the door. The masked figure Tim blushed behind his mask and turned her to him, putting his forehead to hers. Then she giggled and walked out the door. Tim was smiling. "Hey, operator, try not to eat her, okay?" There was a faint laughter in the distance, and he shut the door, following Chris, quiet as a mouse that was asleep. He was surprised his stepdaughter had asked him and not her in the middle of the night. The 6-year-old had barely tolerated him for the months they'd shared a home. "What's wrong? Monsters in your closet?" he asked. She nodded. "Mr. Bones won't let me sleep." "Mr. Bones? That's funny. My monster's name was Mr. Bones when I was your age." "Hey, maybe he's here for me and not you." She reached to turn off the light. He told me the same thing, she said. He heard the closet door creak open. Than yours does. This condition causes normal human food to taste utterly vile, and oh man, is it disgusting. That doesn't mean I don't eat, however. You see, I'm an anthropod. In other words, the only dish capable of offering me substance is the flesh of humans, and oh man, is it delicious. It's not that hard to blend in. Humans are very nutritious, and one feeding can keep me around for a month, allowing me to keep a low profile. I live among the general population while keeping a steady paycheck and a small circle of friends. One day my friend Samuel calls me asking me for a ride to a mechanic to pick up his car that he had dropped off. On the way to the mechanic, Sam notices a taco truck that has set up a shop on the side of the street in town and insists that I pull over. I stop and Sam orders a couple of beef tacos from a gruff-looking man. After a few minutes of his grunting and smacking, Sam tells me I have to try a bite. It's been a while since I last fed, and I'm not looking forward to being sick from this nasty food, but Sam's persistent, and I snatch up a taco to shut him up. My mouth waters as I lift the taco to my lips. I bite, and oh man, is it delicious. In the year 2026, the Misha came back down to earth. She performed miracles and cured the sick. There was no doubt to her ethnicity. She appeared to all nations at once. All believed, all worshipped her. Sometime later, after this period of our history known as the Age of Peace, she dropped a bombshell on us. She warned us that heaven was almost full. Nobody had gone to hell during this age. There were a fixed amount of spots left. Paradise would be closed to all who died after the gates closed. That is when the mass suicide began. Taking your own life, she had told us, was not a sin if you had a pious man. The race was on. She looked on us and was pleased. She returned to her home, to her throne of fire and flames, and greeted all of us with a nod and her wicked horns. In 1983, a group of scientists conducted a radio experiment in an undisclosed faculty. The scientists had theorized that a human without access to any sense or ways to perceive stimuli would be able to precise the sense of God. They believed that the five senses clouded our awareness of eternity, and without them, a human cannot actually establish contact with God by thought. An elderly man who claimed to have nothing left to live for was the only test subject to volunteer. To purge him of all of his senses, the scientists performed a complex operation in which every sensory nerve connecting to the brain was surgically severed. Although the test subject retained full muscular function, he could not see, hear, taste, smell, or feel. With no possible way to communicate with or even sense the outside world, he was alone with only his thoughts. Scientists monitored him as he spoke aloud about the state of mind in jumbled, slurred sentences that he couldn't even hear. After 4 days, the man claimed to be hearing hushed, unintelligible voices in his head. Assuming it was an onset of psychosis, the scientists paid little attention to the man's concern. 2 days later, the man cried that he could hear his dead wife speaking to him, and even more, he could communicate back. The scientists were intrigued, but were not convinced until the subject started naming dead relatives of the scientists. He repeated personal information to the scientists that only their dead spouses and parents would have known of. At the point, a sizable portion of the scientists left the study. After a week of conserving with the deceased through his thoughts, the subject became distressed, saying the voices were overwhelming. In every waking moment, his consciousness was bombarded by hundreds of voices that refused to leave him alone. He frequently threw himself against the wall, trying to elect a pain response. He begged the scientists for sedatives so that he could escape the voices by sleeping. This tactic would work for 3 days until he started having severe night terrors. The subject repeatedly said that he could see and hear the deceased in their dreams. 1 day later, the subject began to scream and claw at his non-functioning eyes, hoping to sense something in the psychic world. The hysterical subject now said that the voices of the dead were deafening and hostile, speaking of hell and the end of the world. At a point, he yelled, "No heaven, no forgiveness," for 5 hours straight. He continued, begged to be killed, but the scientists were convinced that he was close to establishing a contact with God. Day after day, the subject could no longer form sentences. Seeming mad, he started to bite off chunks of his flesh from his arm. The scientists rushed into the test chambers and restored him to a table so he could not kill himself. After a few hours of being lied down, the subject halted his struggling and screaming. He stared blankly at the ceiling as teardrops silently streaked across his face. For 2 weeks, the subject had been manually rehydrated due to the constant crying. Eventually, he turned his head and, despite his blindness, made forced eye contact with the scientist in the study. He whispered, "I have spoken with God. He has abandoned us," and his vital signs stopped. There was no cause of death. After waking up with a jolt, a girl laid in bed for a few seconds longer, reaching over to switch on her bedside lamp. She tried to remember exactly what had stolen her from her sweet slumber when she couldn't. The brunette swung her legs over to the side of the bed and heaved herself up. Checking the time on her phone, she snorted when she saw it was midnight, the witching hour. Knowing that sleep would only evade her, she left the bedroom for the kitchen, a good cup of coffee on her mind. After she passed by the front door, a chill spread like liquid fire down her spine. "It's only winter," she told herself, focusing again on the coffee plan. Measuring out scoops, water, and preparing her cup kept her occupied, but as the dark liquid boiled, she had nothing left to keep on her mind from wandering off. The chill returned, and she couldn't help but glance over behind her to the front door. It stood there innocently, though, just like always. The deadbolt was still in place, and she could see nothing to miss it. Turning back to a coffee, she did her best to forget about the feeling with the cup in her hand. She stared back towards the bedroom. As she walked back to the front door, she decided a quick glance out of the peephole would help calm her restless mind. The chill worsened with each step towards the door and further away from safety and warmth of her blankets. She pressed her empty hand against the cold metal door and took a deep breath before leading her eye to the peephole. At first, she could only see an icky blackness and somehow seemed to swirl itself. When she blinked in surprise, the void melted away. She wished it hadn't. In its place there stood what she could only guess was once a man. The limbs were long and unhumanly awkward, with bulky joints branching off several arms. Not unlike the branches of a tree, the creature was draped in a black suit, somehow making the things more nightmarish to her. The icing of the proverbial cake, however, that seemed to pass as the hellish thing's face. It was as though her mind blurred the ghastly vision, despaired itself further shock and horror. She prived herself away from the door as she stood pressing against it. The scalding mug of the coffee fell, the liquid burning her bare legs as she fell backwards and tried to scrawl away from the door. She knew somehow that her mind hadn't been playing any tricks on her. As she walked away from the door, she watched as the tendrils of the black of the void she saw snake around through the cracks. The girl trapped between the instincts to flee and the gut feeling to not turn round to the door. When the door jolted, the urge to flee overcame her, and she slipped in the burning liquid as she tried to make it back to her room. She knew deep down that she was trapping herself in a corner, but she had to get away from the door. The girl was halfway down the hallway when she heard the previous locked door creak open. She screamed and slipped into a wall, cracking her chin onto what's stunning her. After that, it was only darkness. "Nicole?" A warm male voice snapped her out of her trance. As she turned around, she was met with one of her sister's doctors. She nodded not if she would say anything, or even if she could find her voice, if she had anything to say. That morning, she had gotten an urgent phone call from the hospital saying that her sister, Lindsay, was there. Before she had even let her see, the doctor had pulled her off to the side and insisted that they would talk to her about what had just happened. Phrases like self-inflicted and assault had been thrown around, and Nicole felt her mind rely. She still hadn't fully understood what they had been saying until she saw Linda with her own eyes. Her sister had a bandage wrapped around her head, covering both ears as well as her eyes. They said it was to keep her from deadening the ice from drying out and trying to keep the infection out of the wounds Lindsay had made of her ears. The doctor had guessed that either she or someone had jammed a pencil through them to keep them off balance or to deafen itself against something. There was the mix of first and second degree burns on her hands and legs, and her feet from what assumed to be coffee from her neighbors found slipped all over the entry of her apartment. As Nicole walked to her sister's hospital room the first time, she thought she had spied the silhouette of a man in the window. That she knew it was impossible. Her sister's room was on the third-story floor of the hotel. So, do any of you remember those Mickey Mouse cartoons from the 1930s? The ones that you just popped in a DVD a few years ago? Well, I hear there was one that was unreleased to even Disney classics, the most avoid fans. According to resources, it's nothing special. It's just a continuous loop, like Flintstones, of Mickey walking past 6 buildings that go on for 2 or 3 minutes before fading out. Unlike the cutesy tune put in, though, the song on this cartoon was not a song at all, just a constant banging on a piano for a minute and a half before going to a white noise for the remainder of the film. It was not the jolly old Mickey you've eaten to love either. Mickey was not dancing, not even smiling, just kind of walking as if you or I were walking with a regular facial expression, but for some reason, his head tilted side to side as I kept Esther dementia look. Up until a year or two, everyone believed that after it cut to black, that was it. When Leonard Milton was reviewing the cartoon to put into the complete series, I decided it was too junk to be on the DVD, but I wanted to have a digital copy due to the fact that I was the creation of Walt. When I had digitalized version up on his computer to look at the file, I noticed something. The cartoon was 9 minutes and 4 seconds long. This is what my source emailed to me in full. He is a personal assistant of one hire exclusive at Disney and acquaintance of Mr. Martin himself. After it cut black, it stayed like that until 6 minutes before going back to Mickey walking. The sound was different this time. It was a murmur. It was not a language, but more of a gurgle cry. At the noise more indescribable and louder over the next minute, the picture began to get weird. The sidewalk started to go in directions that seemed impossible based on the physics of Mickey's walking, and the dismal face on Mickey was slowly curling to a smirk. On minute 7, the murmur turned to a blood-curdling scream, the kind of scream painful to hear, and the picture was getting more obscure. Were happening colors that should have been possible at the time. Mickey's face began to fall apart. His eyes rolled on the bottom of his chin, like marbles in a fishbowl, and his curled smile was pointed upward, onto the left side of his face. The building became rubble floating in midair, and the sidewalk was still impossibly negative in wrapping directions, a few seeming inconclusive. What was, as human, known as Syria, directing Mr. Martin got disturbed and left the room, sending an employee to finish the video and take notes on everything happening up to the last second, and afterwards immediately stored the disc of the cartoon into a vault. The distorted screaming lasted until 8 minutes and a few seconds in, and then it abruptly cuts to Mickey's face with the credits in the end of the video. With that, it sounded like a broken music box playing in the background. About this happening for 30 seconds, and whatever was remaining for 30 seconds, I have not been able to get a sliver of information about. From a security guard working under me who was making rounds outside of his room, I was told that after the last frame, the employee stumbled out of the room with pale skin, saying, "Real suffering is not known," 7 times before speedily taking the guard's pistol and offering himself on the spot. The thing I couldn't get on get out of Leonard Moulton. That was the last friend with a piece of Russian text that roughly said, "The sights of hell, STI, bring back in." As far as I know, no one else had seen it, but there have been dozens of attempts at getting the file on amplifier by employees inside the studios of all who have been promptly terminated of their jobs. Whether it got online or is just a discussion, but rumors serve me right. It's known somewhere under suicidemouse.avi. If you ever find a copy of the film, I want you to never view it, and contact me by phone immediately, regardless of the time. When Disney death is covered up as well as ESTA means it has to be something huge. Get back at me. TR. I've yet to find a copy of ESTA, but it is out there. I know. "I love you," she said. Hearing her talk like that made me all warm and fuzzy on the inside. "You know," she said, biting her bottom lip, the naughty slow glimmer dancing in her eye. I can't get you out of my head. I can't get you out of my head either," I whispered. Just being around her made me so nervous. She giggled. "All right then. Good night. Call you in the morning. Can't wait to hear your voice again. Good night," is what I think her boyfriend said on the other end of the line. She hung up on the phone. That's when I opened up the door of the closet I had been hiding in, making sure to block off the exit of her bedroom. I pulled a roll of duct tape from my sweatshirt pocket. Dude, what are you doing? No. 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 Now. What did I do? Nothing. I'm just trying to think of a Thanksgiving creepypasta for tomorrow.
Try looking up Thanksgiving creepypastas.
Yeah, no. Huh. There actually is one.
What is it called?
It's called Thanksgiving Night.
Ow. Oh.
How original! Do I really have to do this one?
Do you want to have a Thanksgiving special?
Thanks! I don't want to, but I have to!
Family would all meet up at my great aunt's house, as she lived on a giant piece of property that ranged from 200 to 250 acres. When you first go through the giant iron gates, you drove 2 miles through dense redwood forest until you drove into the driveway of the glorious mansion. The mansion was 4 stories and had plenty of room for everyone. Thanksgiving was a time for our entire family who we loved and cherished. It was the only time that got us all together under one roof and mingled. Like most families, the children played with the children, the teens played with the teens, and the adults mingled with the adults, except for me. In their eyes, I was the black sheep, the third wheel, the great family embarrassment. But how they all
Being how they all devoted themselves to be Catholic, they didn't agree with my way of life. First of all, I loved playing guitar, loved heavy metal, and worshipped Satan. The latter was in the rebellion to my parents, a decision I soon regretted. All of the above explains why my family shunned me in embarrassment. In their eyes, I was the flawed, their nearly perfect gem, but in my eyes, I was the cream of the crop. I should have known that they were planning something awful when they asked me to join them somewhere. Usually they left me to my own devices in the mansion when they went places. I was naive then, so I went with them. They drove me to the corner of the range. "What the fuck are we doing here?" I asked. My only response was, "Shut up, you blabbering fool." At last we finally got to the destination. Sitting there was my father, my mother, and my sister, all standing around, wearing clothes that you saw on the street. You think that they were returning from a funeral. In the middle of there was a semicircle with narrow was a shallow grave. "What's the hole for?" I asked dumbly. "Take a guess, you satanic fuck," was the reply from my father. The next thing I felt was a thud in the back of my head. I hit the ground with a thud, slap-like noise. Somehow, I was able to turn around in spite of the excruciating pain. I turned around to see my uncle wielding a shovel with blood on the spade. My blood. I touched the back of my head and revealed my fingers covered in blood. I suddenly grew lightheaded and passed out. When I woke up, I inhaled dirt. Luckily for me, my family didn't know how to properly bury someone, so I was able to dig out myself. I sat there and threw up for about 15 minutes. From the point on, I had nothing but reverence stuck in my head. By the time I got back to the mansion, it was Thanksgiving night. Peering into the window, I could see was my family sitting there, saying grace like the sheeply they were. Seeing them in pray made my hatred for them, all them Catholics, grow. It went from a smoldering, smottled anger into a flaming, outrageous hatred. The worst part of it was, I was welcome into it. That's what was left in my heart. I ran into the garage and quickly picked up my great-uncle's shotgun, sitting there, waiting for me, it seemed, beckoning, saying, "Go ahead. Make those fuckers pay for what they did to you, or tried to do." At first, I was decided against it, but my lust for revenge got the better of me. I grabbed the hood of the shotgun from the ammunition to the drawer directly underneath it. Using the door connected to the kitchen to the garage, I snuck into the house. My family, completely oblivious, shouted a pathetic amen into the air and started eating. My last rational thought was, "Are you insane? Put the gun down and just run away. Join a band before it's too late." That was my last rational thought. I slowly crept into the dining room, where they were all sitting. In one long table, the dots were closest to me, my mother in particular. I casually walked up to her for the godforsaken dining room. "Hi, Mom," I shouted as I pulled the trigger. I started laughing uncontrollably and continued firing in the immediate direction of my family until I was empty. My little 4-year-old cousin was crouched in front of my aunt, holding her head while crying. I pulled the shotgun up like a baseball player, getting ready to sling one out of the park and decapitated her with one giant smack of the rib. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" my father asked when he was shot in the gut. "What is wrong with me?" I asked calmly. "What's wrong with you? You guys are the ones that tried to bury me alive. You guys are the ones who felt embarrassed by my presence. You shall pay." With that, I beat him with the butt of the gun and he stopped screaming. Then I beat him some more. After my realization that my entire family was dead, I threw the gun away and dined. Not on the turkey, but on raw human flesh. It was the best Thanksgiving I ever had. Going out for the evening and called a teenage babysitter to take care of their 3 children. When she arrived, they told her that they probably wouldn't be back until later, and that the kids were already asleep, so she didn't need to disturb them. The babysitter started doing her homework while waiting to call her boyfriend. In a while, the phone rings. She answers it, but there's no one on the end, just silence. Then whoever it was hung up. After a few more minutes, the phone rings again. She answers, and this time there's a man on the phone who says in a chilling voice, "Have you checked the children?" At first she thinks it might be her father calling to check up on her and got interrupted, so he decides to ignore it. She goes back to her homework and the phone rings again. "Have you checked the children?" the creepy voice says on the other end. "Mr. Murphy?" she asks, but the caller hangs up. She decides to phone the restaurant where the parents said they'd be dining, but when she asked for Mr. Murphy, she said that he and his wife had left the restaurant 45 minutes earlier. So she called the police and reported that a stranger had been calling her and hanging up. Has he threatened you? The dispatcher asked. No, she says. Well, there's nothing we can do about it. You should try reporting the prank call to the phone company. A few minutes go by and another call. Why haven't you checked the children? The voice says. Who is this? But he hangs up again. She dials 911 again and says, I'm scared. I know he's out there. He's watching me. Have you seen him? The dispatcher asked. She says no. Well, there isn't much we can do about it, the dispatcher says. The babysitter goes in panic mode and pleads with him to help her. Now, it'll be okay, he says. Give me your number and street address, and if we could keep this guy on the phone for at least a minute, we'll try and trace the call. What was your name again? Linda. Okay, Linda. If he calls back, we'll do our best to track the call. But keep calm. Can you do that for me? Yes, she says, hanging up. She decides to turn the lights down so she could see anyone outside, and when she gets another call. It's me, the familiar voice says. Why did you turn the lights down? Can you see me? She says, panicking. Yes, he says after a long pause. Look, you've scared me, she says. I'm shaking. Are you happy? Is that what you wanted? No. Then what do you want? Your blood all over me. She slams the phone down, terrified. Almost immediately, it rings again. Leave me alone! She screams, but it's the dispatcher calling back. His voice is urgent. Linda, we checked the call. It's coming from another room inside the house. Get out of there now. She tears to the front door, attempting to unlock it, and dashes outside, only to find the chain on the top is still latched. In the time it takes for her to unhook it, she sees the door open onto the upstairs. Light streams from the children's bedroom, revealing the profile of a man standing just inside. She finally gets the door open and bursts outside, only to find a cop standing on the doorstep with a gun drawn. At this point, she's safe, of course. But when the capturer and intruder drag him downstairs in handcuffs, she sees that he's covered in blood. Come to find out, all 3 children have been murdered.
The story goes like this. You decide to ride the elevator where you're going up. The murderer will get in with you. He'll wait for you to press a button, and then he'll press the button on the floor right below yours. When you get to that floor, the door will open, and the murderer will get out. As the doors are about to completely close, he will turn around, and in a small opening between the 2 doors, you'll see his knife. Then you hear him say, I'm gonna kill you at the next floor. Then he'll run up the stairs and wait for you. When the doors open, he will be there and kill you. The worst part is not the death itself, but the sheer horror you'll experience in between those 2 floors. When you're trapped in the elevator and you know you're going to get murdered.
So what should we cut off next? An ear? Your big toe? Maybe I'll slice out your tongue so I don't have to listen to your whiny sniveling anymore. I test the restraints again as the mechanic walks across the room into the floor and picks out yet another tool from his surgery kit. But there's no way I can escape. He hums to himself as he lightly runs his finger along each torture device, taking his time to make his selection. Ah, the scalpel. Oh, we can have fun with this. He wraps his hand around my throat. Feels like he's crushing my trachea. Every muscle in my body tenses as he sticks the instrument into my eye. The pain is incredible. He laughs out loud to himself like some kind of supervillain as he twists and turns the pointed object and scrambles the inside of my eye socket. After what feels like minutes, he pulls the thing from my face and a mangled cluster of what used to be my eyeball dangles down from my cheek. He laughs again. I hope you enjoy that, friend, because you're going to be at it all night. All night, I think to myself. He better. It's what I paid him to do after all. On Monday, I came up with the perfect plan. No one even knew we were friends. On Tuesday, he stole the gun from his dad. On Wednesday, we decided to make our move during the following day's pep rally. On Thursday, while the entire school was in the gym, we waited just outside the doors. I was to use the gun on whoever walked out first. Then he would take the gun and go into the gym blasting. I walked up to Mr. Quinn, the guidance counselor, and shot him in the face 3 times. He fell back into the gym dead. The shots were deafening. We heard screams in the auditorium. No one could see us yet. I handed him the gun and whispered, "Your turn." He ran into the gym and started firing. I followed a moment after. He hadn't hit anyone yet. Kids were scrambling and hiding. It was mayhem. I ran up behind him and tackled him. We struggled. I wrenched the gun out of his hand, turning it onto him and killed him. I closed his mouth forever. On Friday, I was anointed a hero. It was indeed the perfect plan. It all began when I started to notice quick changes in my mother. No, it began way earlier than that when I really think about it. Years. Maybe even before I could remember the difference between right and wrong, which is a pretty long time. I'd always been one of the 2 brothers in my family. My mother was single. She always had been ever since I could remember. Our father had bailed out on us when the news about me had arrived. We loved our mother. We really did. She bought us nice clothes even though we couldn't afford it, providing necessary food and making a good home for us. Everything was great. My mom had some issues with drinking. It wasn't just a problem. It was a big problem. She stayed single though she tried to meet others. It would always go well in the beginning until she would change her mind and show the next man out the door. Always the same story with her. I felt very alone. My brother wasn't very interested playing with me. Seeing he was all about 5 years older, and he thought of me as an annoying little sibling. But all I wanted was company. I didn't find any success in making friends at school or during my spare time. I just spent every moment alone. My mom didn't care, of course. She was too busy trying to finish up her work, or she could spend the last hours at home drinking her evenings away. But I guess every single second of loneliness brought something out of me. I started to daydream a lot. Making imaginary friends was one of my favorite hobbies. Yes, a hobby. I made new ones so often it was hard to keep up, even for me. You see, there was a particular imaginary friend. He wasn't like the others. There was only one who gave me more peace than everything. He'd play with me, of course, but he'd only come around that nighttime. Though he'd talk we'd talk and fool around, making super sure my mom didn't hear us cheerfully giggling. He was an expert of many things, but he was the best at crafting and making me puppets. Every day he'd turn up with a new doll, and any design I wanted. That was his thing. The puppet man. I always managed to escape the fact that I had an imaginary friend, but with him, it was hard to deny that he was actually there, because I knew he was. Every night when he said I had to go to sleep, he stood there for another hour just to watch me and make sure I was actually falling asleep. His golden glowing eyes observing me from afar in the darkness. I stared back at him. His gray face was keeping me calm as he kept smiling towards me. I fell asleep every night, but I couldn't talk to anyone about the creature visiting me every night. It was odd. Time went on as it should have. I grew up, so did my brother. Only thing that seemed to stay the same was my mom's drinking habits. My brother moved out around the age of 18. He couldn't put up with her anymore. I was only 12 at the time, and I wouldn't get out of my home for a long time. I was waiting patiently, though. I suppose that was the only thing I could do when being alone. My imaginary friend never left, however, and it started to become a problem. He continued to visit me every single evening, keeping me company. I started to ignore him. I was mad. Had to be. At 12 years old, the whole imaginary friend deal seemed ridiculous. I had other things to do anyway. Homework, playing on my PlayStation 2. I was content. Not happy. Just neutral. I didn't feel lonely. I felt that though a long time ago. Yet there he was, staring at me, his face hidden beneath the shadows of my room, glowing eyes studying me. Another year passed. No success. I eventually got tired of everything. School was being a downer, and my mom got worse with her drinking, even to the point where she started to self-harm. She refused to talk to me, even when I tried. She lost her job, eventually. It was something I had wanted to see happen for a long time. I always seemed like something that might help her realize that she had a problem. But no. After that, my mom wouldn't do anything but sit there, drinking all her problems away. She became angrier with time, everyone noticing so. Everyone who was, well, me. I did everything I could not to stay at home, sleeping over at my aunt's place, or even trying to contact my brother. But there was even certain nights I had to stay home, and it was hell on earth. Every single day, she was scolding me for nothing. It was such stupid, simple things. Forgetting to buy milk on the way home, forgetting to cook dinner. What could I do? I was 13. My mom couldn't even tell me how sorry she was. She kept on. And one night, she just lost it. I remember it clearly. It was something about the dishes. I had to clean after dinner like always, and this time I accidentally dropped the plate. It fell on the floor, hitting hard and shattering into tiny pieces. My mom was, of course, furious with me. I could understand her at some point, get why she was upset with me, but now I blamed her for everything that had happened. But this time, she just didn't scream in my face for a minute or two. This time she was acting out violently, throwing a chair across the room. She screamed at me, not even for being a perfect son. How she lost everything because of me and my brother. Everything was our fault. A slap to the face, and then she was done. I ran and locked myself up in my room, and there he was, waiting for me. It was evening after all, and for the first time in almost 2 years, I spoke to him. He was the only soul I could talk to, even though he was imaginary. Even though I was basically talking to myself, I didn't care. I desperately needed it, and for the first time, he spoke to me. He was more calmer than I thought he'd be. Your mom, she's evil. I disagreed. She wasn't evil. Or was she? She ruined my life. She hated me, but I still shook my head. Don't cry, he spoke to me. Big boys don't cry, so calm down. I'll go talk to your mom. I'll go to sleep. You'll need it. I did as he said. No questions. I went to bed. My heart was pounding, and my head was spinning. My mom never checked up on me. She would probably leave anyway. That's the only thing she ever did. Give up on us. On everything. On life. It didn't take me long to fall asleep that night. In the morning, I would just return to school like nothing had ever happened and find the same pathetic alcoholic mother the next day. But there was never meant to be another day. I woke up again. It was completely dark around me. The apartment had been lost of all its power. I didn't wake up all by myself, though. There was some kind of noise outside of my bedroom. Weary and insecure, I stepped up from my bed and moved out into the hall. It was a creaking noise, like someone stepping on ice or a broken piece of glass. But it was far from dull than that. My curiosity took over and I continued until I found the source of the breaking sound and snapping. It was from my mother's bedroom. What was going on in there? My mom was supposed to be sleeping at this hour. I came closer. The noise appeared louder. After a minute of listening outside of my room, I decided to go in. I pushed the wooden door and stumbled to my knees. What I saw, no. What was supposed to be such a thing. My mother had been thrown towards the floor. Her face was bloody, and her nose seemed broken. She was kneeling down with her arms extended backwards in an unnatural position. Hands cramped out of pain. She looked like she was screaming, but only coughed out, wheezing hard. She saw me. That's when I lost it. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I only crawled towards the bedside, clutching onto what looked like the thing to save me at that point. My mother's arms were broken in front of my face, but something I couldn't hear or see. I could only see her, my mother, scared out of her life. And then he slowly appeared before me, his gray hands in my face, emerging from the shadows. His golden eyes were completely focused on her, and then I could see what he was doing. With one foot on her back, his fingertips whipped golden threads that tied themselves to her arms. He was breaking my mother's arms in two. My puppet man. Then her bones wouldn't hold it anymore. They eventually broke, snapping in a horrible trail of sounds. I tried to scream again, but everything was once again muted by my own fright. I tried to calm down, tried to realize I was only imagining everything, but it was real. My own friend, imaginary friend, was killing my mom, and I did nothing to stop it. He wasn't pleased. I tried to call to him, tried to beg him to stop, but he just wouldn't listen. He only continued to hurt my mother further. He'd take his time and seemed to only break every bone in her body. He forced me to sit there, made me watch as he broke my mother apart. He told me he was going to get rid of evil. I wanted to believe him, but I just couldn't. He broke her legs, ribs, even fingers. Bones turning every direction they couldn't. I screamed and screamed. No one heard me. His golden eyes turned to look at me as he hushed me for one final time. Then he slaughtered her. Beautiful golden glows, strings of death wrapped around her throat. Squeezing out the last glimpse of life, I could see my mother's eyes, and it was the last thing I could remember before it went dark. I passed out on the floor by the bedside. Our neighbors had heard my screaming and had called the police. Everyone pitied the orphan who had seen his mother die in front of her eyes. But according to them, my mother hadn't been murdered. She had been found in the middle of the room with a noose around her neck. The rope hadn't been able to carry her body after a while and had brushed in two, causing my mother's corpse to fall down to the floor. I never spoke about her death ever again. Neither did I say another word about my imaginary friend. Maybe it had been a horrible dream after all, and he was always in my head. Even at my mother's funeral, I was completely alone. My brother didn't even show up. Only my aunt and my uncle were there. Everyone saw this coming somehow. Everyone but me. And I spent hours waiting for him to come and pick me up. The only one who had listened to me all this time, held me company, comfort me when I needed it the most. And when I was standing alone by her coffin, I suddenly felt someone grabbing my hand, and I smiled, his gray hand on my shoulder.
When I was a little kid, I would race up to the top of the stairs as fast as I could, like it was some sort of silly game. Well, I must have been 5 or 6 at the time. I'm not sure. But I know I was very little. Somewhere along the way, a voice at the top of the stairs started to whisper to me. It would make bets with me, such as, I bet you a penny you can't make it to the top of the stairs. I don't really think there was a certain amount of time or anything. As I said, I was very little, so I probably didn't have any counting abilities anyway. I recall just sitting at the top of the stairs having conversations with this voice. About the betting, of course. Eventually the voice, which was a whisper of a man's voice, not my own voice in my head, started to bet me my life instead of pennies. He'd say, I bet you your life you can't make it up the stairs. As I got older, it stopped. I never really thought about it at all. I never mentioned it to anyone until one night. I was sleeping over at my brother's place, and we were talking about spooky stories. Out of nowhere, I brought up the voice at the top of the stairs, and my brother got all quiet. Before I even mentioned anything, he said, Did it make bets with you? We both looked horrified at each other.
They met on Craigslist. It was he who posted the ad, and after they exchanged a few pictures, the two decided to meet. He pulled up to the building late that evening and sent a text announcing his arrival. The message he received in return was a code to get into the building, an apartment number, and instructions that the door would be open so he could let himself in. As he rode up the elevator, he could feel guilt and dread manifesting in the pit of his stomach. He adored his wife, but their love life had grown stale ever since the birth of their child. He needed the physical attention that she was not providing him with. Still, it felt wrong. As he proceeded down the barren hallway, his heart began to race. Just as the text said, the door to the apartment had been propped open. He entered through the doorway into the dark room, and once more dread took its hold on him. No one was waiting at the entrance, so he carefully shuffled through the living room on his way to the bedroom door. He opened the door to find his wife, bonded and gagged, lying across the bed. Shock shot through his body. His reflexes kicked in, and he hurried to his wife to untie her. Not more than a second after he entered, the bedroom door slammed shut behind him. He whirled around to see what kind of woman would abduct his wife and hoax him into a trap. But it wasn't a woman. It wasn't even human. He screamed when he saw its face. In New Zealand, 1967, George McCannon opened an amusement park for children and teens, calling it Thrills and Fun Amusement Park. The park was an instant hit for locals. The nearby forest was unaffected by its building, so locals saw no problem of its opening. No expense was paid in the building of the park, even being rated by local newspapers a local Disneyland, so it was a shock to all when they abruptly closed down in 1981. A fence was made around the park and no one was allowed to enter. The police would get involved. It was a shame to close, but there were definitely reasons. A month after the park opened, repairs had to be made in a new attraction. One of the dino rides, the ride consists of a singular small cart that drove slowly along the path of trees, and alongside the trees were models of dinosaurs. While driving along, the cart goes out of sight when people who run it and people waiting to go on next. Strange things began happening on the ride. Carts that went behind other carts ended up in front of the first ones on the way back. Carts would take twice as long to get around the track than they were usually to take. At one point, when the dino ride was being tested, the workers sent the 6 carts on after another into the tracks to see if it worked. Only 5 came back. But the strangest thing about the ride was that people on the carts seemed unaffected by what was happening. They didn't even seem to notice that sometimes carts that went behind them ended up in front of them when they came back. Another possible reason was the sky coaster. Parts of the tracks on the roller coaster would randomly break. This was strange because the sky coaster was made of steel. When parts of the track broke, the pieces were never found. The park closed down soon after a figure was spotted wandering around the park. The person appeared to be male. He had dark black hair that seemed to be spiked with gel. The person looked around 20 years of age, quite young. This man had been spotted in the background of some family photos from the park. In every picture he looked at the camera, his head tilted slightly. He always had a large smile on his face. People who looked at any photos had said he was left quoting from memory staff uneasy. The man was never identified, and any staff workers at the entrance didn't remember seeing a man enter any box, though this is unreliable staff since the park didn't remember anyone they see in the park. In security footage, it showed a man going on to 2 rides, the dino ride and the sky coaster. Didn't take me long enough to figure out something weird about that. To confirm my fears, it showed the man getting on the ride soon before anything strange happened on them. Security footage never showed the man getting off either ride, but as I suspected, no one noticed the thing at the time. The reason the park closed down was because of the death of a 14-year-old boy. He was found mutilated in the dino trees. Minutes before his death, he had a family photo taken. In the picture was the strange man. Only this time he was right behind the 14-year-old boy. The strange man had the same look on his face as he did in every other photo he was in. His head tilted in a horrible grin. I worked for YouTube during 666. I was a busy worker, and I recently uploaded videos here. What I didn't know was some of the YouTube monitors suspended a YouTube account. I told them what it was, but they wouldn't want me to. I was wondering why I wasn't allowed to go on that page, rather than what it was. But just then, one of the monitors handed me a piece of paper with writing on it. It was a link. He pleaded me not to ask about the secret username ever again. The link was a YouTube user link. It said www.youtube.com/666. I went home after work and typed it on my computer. I found out the account was suspended, so it's no worry. But when I refreshed the page several times, some things changed. All the video tags turned into letters X666. And every single text in the screen said 666. I thought someone was hacking my computer, but I denied it and then refreshed it. Just then a channel popped up. It was 666's channel. I looked at some of the videos. Most of them were crazy. One video contained 4 babies twisting their heads. Another video swirled with graphics. I decided to get out the video and onto another one, but a blank popped up. I clicked the blank button and it took me to another video by 666. The video was shown of a woman drowning into a pool of blood and disgusting things happening. I thought this was disgusting, so I decided to pause the video. It didn't let me, because it wasn't responding due to Internet Explorer, but it wouldn't budge. I also tried to get on to another video too, but it didn't work either. I thought there was no other way to get out until I thought, the shutdown button. Of course. I decided to shut down my computer so that the virus wouldn't get through my computer again, but the button wouldn't work. Shutdown buttons responded all the time. I knew that. I was hacked. All hope was lost. I couldn't get out of Explorer, and the video kept going on and on. There was nothing to stop me. The girl in the video started staring at me, looking at me with random sounds and beatings playing.